Chapter 339, Change. Chapter 339, Change. When he heard Zimo's warning, Jiang Yu's back was facing everyone as a killing intent flashed through his eyes momentarily. Apart from everyone from Ethereal Peak, the other cultivators either did not hear Zimo or scoffed at his warning and did not believe it. Ji Yaoxue turned around and asked, frowning, "Zimo, what's wrong?" "Something is not right." Zimo shook his head. "Those corpses are pitch black and they died for unknown reasons without even a chance to escape. They must have met with something extremely terrifying." "Fu. Si Yutong, who was about to head forth, laughed. "Zimo, aren't you too cowardly? You don't even dare to take something in the ancient battlefield that has no owner. I suggest you hide in a place to cultivate and don't come out ever." Zimo was at odds with perfected being Tsong Lang. As a disciple of perfected being Tsong Lang, there was naturally no way Si Yutong would be nice to Zimo. Pausing for a moment, Si Yutong turned and smiled at Ji Yaoxue before declaring confidently, "Fellow Taoist Yaoxue, don't worry. I can guarantee that there's no danger in front of us. Look at those corpses. They don't have any flesh or blood. This means that they must have died at least 10 years ago, causing the corpses to dry up. How can there be any danger?" That was the same reason why many cultivators dared to step forward. Since those cultivators had been dead for so long, even if there was any danger, it should be long gone and wouldn't have lingered on the spot for the entire time. Dead for at least 10 years. Zimo's eyes flickered as he shook his head. Not necessarily. By now, the cultivator at the front had arrived beside the corpses. Even though the great Zhou guard at the front was excited, he was still a little cautious and did not want to venture too deep, merely picking up a storage bag by a corpse at the edge. He paused for a while. There was no danger. The guard opened the storage bag and his eyes lit up. Instantly, he stuffed the storage bag into his own and rushed forward to pick up more storage bags. When the other cultivators saw that, they rushed towards the corpses without further hesitation. All of a sudden, the gravel beside the corpse moved and a fist-sized bag slowly bulged. It grew larger, as if something was about to burst out of the sand. In the blink of an eye, similar bags appeared on the gravel one after another, attracting the attention of many cultivators. Those who were more alert already rode on their flying swords and soared into the skies. Poof! There was a crisp sound. A gigantic black-red ball suddenly burst forth from the sand and landed next to the feet of many cultivators. Before they could react, the black-red balls opened up, turning into worms with red heads and legs and black bodies. Densely packed, they swarmed towards the legs of the cultivators. Each worm was about the length of an arm and had 1,000 feet that shuffled across the gravel at the same time. They were extremely fast and instantly climbed onto the legs of many cultivators. Oh! A series of tragic cries rang one after another. Right in front of everyone, black fogs appeared on the faces of those cultivators one after another as their eyes bulged out like dead fish, filled with terror. The blood vessels from beneath their skin gradually surfaced and suddenly exploded. Blood centipedes. Zimo's expression changed slightly. In order to find out more about night spirits' origins, he had browsed through many texts in Ethereal Peak about ancient living beings and knew about such savage beings. Blood centipedes were living beings of the ancient era and lived in groups. They were highly toxic and could turn flesh into a puddle of blood with a single bite before feeding in their groups. In a few breaths' time, they could devour a person till only a corpse was left. The toxic nature of the blood centipede was also the reason why the corpses were pitch black. It was said that they were long extinct in Tianhuang mainland, but who knew that they would exist in the ancient battlefield? It's the ancient blood centipedes. Hurry and retreat! Suddenly, Jiang Yu exclaimed and turned around hurriedly to stand beside Ji Yaoxue. There was a flash of panic in his eyes, as though he was stricken with fright as he panted. Hurry and leave, third princess. We can't linger here. But what about them? Even though she was a princess of Great Zhou, her face was somewhat pale from the sudden change in events. She pointed at the chaotic crowd in front of her, looking pained. We can't save them. If we stay here, we'll die as well. Jiang Yu shouted. In just a short while, many cultivators were already dead with their flesh gone. The only thing left behind were their pitch-black corpses with their storage bags at the side. It was the exact same way as when they first found the corpses. The 4 great Zhou guards at the forefront had all perished and lost their lives. Some cultivators at the back managed to avoid the tragedy, and some of them stood rooted to the ground, scared stiff. A cultivator at the front turned around with a look of horror on his face. His face was blackening as he reached out with his arm and grabbed the shoulder of a weapon refinement master behind him, calling out, "Save me!" Poof! The person who spoke suddenly turned into a mist of blood, splattering all over the face of the weapon refinement master. The weapon refinement master was so terrified that he snapped out of his senses and shrieked, turning around to flee immediately. However, he only managed to take a few steps when he paused and his face turned black, turning into a puddle of blood. His corpse collapsed to the ground and a swarm of blood centipedes engulfed and swallowed it immediately. Pest! When the surviving cultivators saw that, they gasped and their pupils constricted. The toxin was so poisonous that even if a Foundation establishment cultivator was not bitten by a blood centipede, he could die just by touching a few drops of blood from an infected cultivator. Ji Yaoxue realized that there was no way to save the cultivators bitten by the blood centipedes. All of them would die here if they tried to save the others forcefully. Si Yutong was so scared that his face was pale as a sheet. He felt a lingering fear in his heart, thankful that he had argued with Su Zimo and was slower. "This way! Everyone, ride on your flying swords. The blood centipedes can't fly." Zhang Yu ordered and leaped on his flying sword, speeding off in a direction with Ji Yaoxue and the remaining survivors. The survivors were already in a state of panic and summoned their flying swords subconsciously, soaring into the air and escaping behind Zhang Yu. The entire place was in chaos. Among everyone present, Su Zimo was the only one who could maintain his composure as he ran on the ground with Night Spirit, following tightly behind everyone. Even though they were already far from the corpse area, the sense of danger in Su Zimo's heart intensified instead of disappearing. "Be careful, everyone!" Before he could finish his words, there was a loud bang. The gravel in front suddenly collapsed, forming a massive pit. A huge hideous head popped out from the sand pit with 1,000 feet shuffling at the same time. Suddenly, it raised half of its body, facing everyone and emitting an extremely terrifying aura. A pair of sharp fangs that exuded a foul smell bit together, producing a clanging sound. Its bloodshot eyes were like blazing suns, fuming with killing intent. This was an incomparably massive blood centipede, and the half of its body that was revealed was already 100 feet long. "Ah!" everyone exclaimed. Even though the blood centipede could not fly, the raised half of its body was a full 100 feet long and blocked everyone's path instantly. They were obstructed at the front and chased at the back. Chapter 340. Poison Immunity. Chapter 340. Poison Immunity. Faced with this huge creature that blocked their way, 2 cultivators' eyes were filled with madness. They wanted to circle around the blood centipede and continue running. Swash! Swash! The blood centipede swung the 2 feelers on its head that were like 2 long black whips. They tore through the void with a pungent smell, pulling the 2 cultivators back immediately. Ah! Ah! The 2 of them let out tragic cries and were turned into a pool of blood, devoured by the blood centipede almost instantly. To the side! Su Zimo narrowed his eyes as he pointed to a new direction and shouted. Without any hesitation, everyone from Ethereal Sword turned around and sped in that direction. Many cultivators followed suit subconsciously. Swash! A black shadow darted by and a cultivator that was riding on his flying sword in midair was swept by the blood centipede's feelers, dying miserably in its mouth. It was too fast. The cultivators were not exactly agile in midair with sword kinesis flight, and it was difficult for them to escape the feelers of the blood centipede. Some of them were bound to die when the black shadow swept by. The massive body of the blood centipede was almost completely emerged from the ground. Even at 200 feet long, it was surprisingly agile. Clang! 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 Its 1,000 feet shuffled at the same time on the gravel, causing sparks to fly everywhere along with a cringing sound. Swiftly, the blood centipede charged towards Su Zimo and the others. Swash! The blood centipede swept its feelers once more and they sliced through the air. This time round, the black shadow that darted was aimed for Ji Yaoxue. 2 of the great Zhou guards made a snap decision and spun around, defending in front of Ji Yaoxue. They summoned 2 flying swords decisively and slashed at the black shadow. Buzz! The swords shone brightly. Both of them were superior-grade flying swords. Furthermore, the two great Zhou guards that struck were 5 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivators. Clang! A metallic clashing sound reverberated when the blades struck the black shadow. The black shadow was the feeler of the blood centipede and should have been the weakest spot of its body. However, even 2 attacks from superior-grade flying swords that were summoned by 5 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivators could not slice it apart. The 2 superior-grade flying swords were repelled and fell to the ground nearby. The blades dimmed and turned black, clearly already useless. Everyone's expressions changed when they saw that. Squeak, squeak. Upon receiving a counterattack, the blood centipede let out an ear-piercing sound and turned ferocious. Its eyes shone with a scarlet, bloodthirsty light as it lunged forward even faster than before. It struck with its other feeler, letting out a swooshing sound that rattled one's soul. At that moment, the 2 great Zhou guards had just lost their flying swords. Although the black shadow was coming for them, they could not dodge because the Princess of Great Zhou was right behind them. Both of them touched their storage bags and crushed a protection talisman respectively before taking out 2 shields to block in front of them. A look of despair flickered through their eyes. Through the previous exchange, both of them had already realized that they could not match the blood centipede's strength. The toxins on its feelers alone were enough to poison them to death. Zimo's gaze turned cold as he stamped on the ground. With a boom, he leaped into midair wielding a blood-colored saber. Blood Quencher, the perfect spirit weapon. Against this ferocious beast from the ancient era, Zimo did not dare to hold back as his power of bloodline and spirit energy churned at the same time. A rumbling sound of thunder and gushing tsunami echoed from his body in a terrifying manner. 5 spirit patterns shone on Blood Quencher brightly and a bloodied glow enveloped it at the same time. Slash! Blood Quencher tore through the air and turned into a blood beam, colliding against the black shadow. Poof! A flash of blood splattered through the sky. The feeler of the blood centipede could not withstand the sharpness of blood centipede and was cut into 2. Squeak! The blood centipede shrieked tragically in pain against that massive injury as its severed feeler that was as thick as an arm wagged frenziedly, spraying endless black blood. Fresh blood gushed out the moment Blood Quencher severed the feeler. Zimo could not dodge and was covered from head to toe in the poisonous blood. Everyone from Ethereal Peak felt their hearts sank when they saw it, realizing that it was a bad sign. Brother! Xuantian swayed and felt her head spin, nearly falling from the sky. Thankfully, Lang Rou supported her in time. Ah! Ji Yaoxue shrieked and her face was pale as a sheet. It was over. The toxin within the blood of the cultivators that were bitten by the small blood centipedes was already enough to kill a Foundation Establishment cultivator, let alone the toxin from this massive creature. Hurry and run, third princess! Ji Yaoxue persuaded hurriedly when he saw Ji Yaoxue standing motionlessly in midair, refusing to leave. He continued, Zimo's a dead man. There's no point for you to stay here any longer. Third princess. Zimo! Ji Yaoxue called out softly with a pained expression. Xiaoning, Yaoxue. Leave first. I'm fine. Just as everyone thought that Zimo was dead, his voice rang out. It sounded no different from usual. Even under such circumstances, there was no trace of panic and provided an inexplicable sense of assurance. He was not dead. By then, most of the cultivators were also gradually realizing something strange. Normally, one would turn into a puddle of blood and be rendered to a corpse almost instantly after being tainted by the poisonous blood of the blood centipedes. However, more than 10 breaths had passed and Zimo was still standing on the spot. Even though they were facing his back, nothing seemed unusual. Poison immunity. 2 words flashed across everyone's mind. In reality, Zimo was also shocked when he was sprayed by the blood centipede's blood. He could clearly feel a powerful and destructive blood surge through his body, seemingly able to reap his life. However, the moment that blood seeped in, his bloodline started churning and his tsunami blood gushed within his body, rushing at the poisonous blood. Lightning was mighty and ferocious, able to purge away all evil. Not only that, Zimo had devoured a dragon before. The bloodline of the dragon race was extremely noble and terrifying. It was not something that a mere ancient blood centipede could compare against. Be it the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, the Void Thunder Manual, or the essence energy of a divine dragon, any one of those powers was enough to completely suppress and devour the poisonous blood of the blood centipede. Furthermore, Zimo was in possession of all three terrifying powers. In a few breaths' time, the poisonous blood failed to hurt Zimo and was instead completely cleansed by his bloodline, with its toxins purged entirely. Right now, Zimo could be said to be immune to all poisons. Click, clack, click. Not far away, a group of blood centipedes were already rushing in this direction. Dense and cluttered, the ground was filled with an unsettling shade of red and black. If he was faced with a single blood centipede, even if it was huge and menacing, Zimo might not have retreated. However, it was hard to guarantee that nothing would happen if he was swarmed by a group of them. Furthermore, this was the ancient battlefield where dangers lurked everywhere. If he was trapped here, there was a chance that an even more terrifying and powerful ancient living being might be attracted over. This was not a place where he should linger. Zimo turned to leave and put away Blood Quencher. Instead, he withdrew a gigantic bow that shone with 4 spirit patterns and shot an arrow backwards without looking at all. Naturally, a single arrow was not enough to kill the Blood Centipede King. However, it could impede its movement. Chapter 341. I'll Strike. Chapter 341. I'll Strike. Everyone fled in panic. Zimo hung around the back and was able to prevent the attacks of the blood centipedes. In reality, the moment the blood centipede king appeared, Night Spirit's eyes shone with a murderous killing intent, and it even harbored thoughts of turning around to fight the blood centipede king. However, Zimo did not wish to get entangled with those poisonous creatures at this place, and gestured for Night Spirit to just protect Xiaoning. Most importantly, it was because Zimo was wary about someone else. Jiang Yu. In theory, Zimo should not be suspicious of the commander that was designated by the Emperor of Great Zhou. However, through their interactions, Zimo was certain that there was something wrong with this person. Zimo ran on the ground. Under the gravel not far ahead, 2 big bags surfaced and another swarm of blood centipedes were about to emerge. Night Spirit was a step faster and with a single leap, stomped down with its massive feet. 5 claws extended silently and grabbed with force. Poof! The blood centipedes coiled together and the red-black balls that had just emerged were crushed by Night Spirit instantly. Even though the poisonous blood splattered all over Night Spirit, it was indifferent and merely shook everything off before continuing to sprint ahead. Night Spirit could not be hurt by the horrifying poisonous blood either. Behind the group was a sea of red and black, as though endless waves were surging as countless blood centipedes moved. After suffering the injury, the blood centipede king no longer dared to wave its feelers casually. However, it found itself having to retreat due to Zimo's arrows each time it wanted to charge forth. The hunt continued for a long time before the group found a green shade of grass ahead. Within that desolate desert, green represented life and everyone was invigorated. When they flew above the grass, the red and black sea chasing them came to a gradual stop. Blood centipedes lived in the desert and would not leave it that easily. Standing at the edge of the desert, the blood centipede king raised its massive body and shuffled its 1,000 feet, roaring in the direction of Zimo's group. Its bloodshot eyes looked indignant. When they saw that, everyone slowed down and eventually put away their flying swords to descend on the ground. Gasping for breath, all of them were rattled. The escape had taken a huge toll on everyone's spirit energy, and they were almost drained. They would not have lasted for much longer if they had to continue flying. Ji Yaoxue counted the crowd and she sighed gently as her eyes dimmed. In less than a day, the 50 people that entered the ancient battlefield were down to less than 20. The cultivators of the elixir and weapon rankings had lower cultivation realms and most of them did not make it. Apart from 5 great Zhou guards, Jiang Yu included, Zimo, Xiaoning and the 3 from Ethereal Peak, a miserable few were left and everyone was in low spirits, looking wretched. To think that the ancient battlefield would be this cruel. Initially, most of them harbored hopes of a fruitful expedition. In fact, they even dreamed about obtaining the Meridian Unlocking Elixir, Connate spirit weapons or the inheritance of some fallen sects. But now, some of them were completely frightened by what they had just experienced. Apart from Jiang Yu, Even the few remaining great Zhou guards revealed traces of uneasiness and fear in their eyes. Should we find a place to stay and just cultivate there for an entire year without heading out anymore? A female cultivator asked timidly. In less than a day, more than half the cultivators were killed. If they were to continue roaming about in the remaining year, could they even get out alive? That's right. Si Yutong coughed gently. The spirit qi in the ancient battlefield is so rich. It won't be a wasted trip even if we were to just cultivate for a year here. With that said, he looked at Su Zimo, who was calm and indifferent, laughing dryly. If someone wants to die and wishes to continue heading out, go on ahead. However, don't expect us to follow you. The path of cultivation was something that defied the heavens to begin with. Every step was filled with thorns, and it was only natural that one would encounter countless dangers along the way. If one were to be fearful of advancing after meeting with some setbacks, their accomplishments in the future would be limited as well. Su Zimo ignored Si Yutong and swept his glance across the crowd, coming to an understanding. Of those that were remaining, even though everyone from Ethereal Peak, Shijian, Junhao and the others were shocked, none of them had fears in their eyes. Their gazes were still resolute. Jiang Yu said in a deep voice, "We don't have many people left, so no one should act on their own and divide our strength. We'll follow the original plan of heading to that cave to stay the night." Commander Jiang, should we rest for a while first to recover our strength and spirit energy? Someone suggested. No. Jiang Yu rejected the suggestion without hesitation. Time is tight. We have to hurry and get there before night falls. He beckoned and determined the direction before walking in front to lead everyone. Ji Yaoshue slowed down and came to Su Zimo's side, asking concernedly with a worried expression, "Zimo, are you all right?" No matter what, she had witnessed the poisonous blood of the blood centipede spraying on Su Zimo. She was still worried that the poisonous blood might do damage to him. "I'm fine." Su Zimo shook his head and whispered, "There's something wrong with Jiang Yu. You have to be careful of him." Ji Yaoshue paused for a moment and raised her brow, looking perplexed. "Even though we suffered heavy casualties, it was an accident and we can't blame it on Jiang Yu entirely. Furthermore, he was at the ancient battlefield 10 years ago and made it back alive. Father also designated him as the commander. I don't think there should be a problem." "The problem is precisely because he has been to the ancient battlefield before," Su Zimo replied. Given his experience, there's no way he couldn't tell that there was something wrong with those corpses. However, he allowed the others to pick up the storage bags. Furthermore, pausing for a moment, he continued, after discovering those corpses, he did not continue moving forward. Ji Yaoshue was extremely smart and instantly realized that something was amiss as well. Su Zimo said in a low voice, "In fact, I'm suspecting that he was deliberately letting them die so as to weaken the strength of the team." "But what motive does he have for doing that? What does he stand to gain from that?" Ji Yaoshue could not understand. Su Zimo shook his head. "I don't know either. How about we join forces to suppress and interrogate him right now?" Right after she said that, Ji Yaoshue shook her head to her own suggestion and frowned. "No, everyone's tired and worn out right now. Furthermore, Jiang Yu has the highest cultivation realm and we won't be able to restrain him even with our combined strength." Suddenly, Ji Yaoshue realized a horrifying fact. If there was truly something wrong with Jiang Yu, no one would be his match given his strength as a 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. "If you're agreeable, I'll strike to take him down." Right then, Su Zimo's voice rang out, his tone casual and indifferent. However, for some reason, his words made Ji Yaoshue's initially uneasy heart calm down instantly. Chapter 342, Great Shang Dynasty. Chapter 342, Great Shang Dynasty. Even though Ji Yaoshue did not believe that Su Zimo could take down a 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, his words gave her an inexplicable sense of assurance. It was the same feeling she felt back then in Songlang Mountain Range. Suddenly, Ji Yaoshue thought of something and her cheeks flushed, revealing a flawless beauty. Just as her imagination was running wild, Su Zimo's voice rang again. "Someone's coming." Ah! Ji Yaoshue snapped back to her senses and followed Su Zimo's gaze. However, she saw no one. In her bewilderment, Zimo's eyes narrowed and flickered as he suddenly declared, "Everyone, please stop. There's a group of cultivators headed for this direction in an imposing manner. They don't seem to be friendly. Everyone, be careful." The moment he said that, a commotion broke out in the crowd. Their group of 50 cultivators had suffered a massive loss and were down to less than 20 who were exhausted. If anyone had ill intentions, there was a high chance they might not survive. Jiang Yu walked right at the front and his back was facing Zimo. A cold and murderous intent flashed through his eyes. "There's nobody?" Many cultivators looked around and upwards nervously. However, they saw nothing but emptiness. All of a sudden, the sound of clothes fluttering sounded in the air ahead. At first, it was barely audible, but it grew louder as time went on. Before long, shadows appeared on the horizon and sped over at an extremely fast speed. "Commander Jiang, what should we do? Are they targeting us?" a fearful cultivator asked in a low voice. Jiang Yu did not reply and only smiled coldly. There were over 50 cultivators on the other side, and they arrived in front of them in the blink of an eye. The few great Zhou guards yelled with changed expressions, "The great Shang Dynasty." Upon hearing those words, everyone's heart sank. Junhao frowned, seemingly surprised. Ji Yaoshue's expression turned extremely terrible as well. The Tianhuang North region consisted of 4 great dynasties: Great Xia, Great Shang, Great Zhou and Great Yu. There were always wars at the borders and the dynasties coexisted like fire and water. Under such circumstances, it was almost equivalent to the death penalty for them to encounter cultivators from the Great Shang dynasty. Zimo's gaze landed on Jiang Yu and his heart stirred as he vaguely understood something. The appearance of the Great Shang dynasty's cultivators was too coincidental and perfect. This was their weakest moment. Furthermore, the cultivators of the Great Shang dynasty had located them with such precision in less than a day. It was as though someone was guiding them. None of it made sense. However, everything could be explained if Jiang Yu was someone from the Great Shang dynasty. He had intentionally led everyone to the corpses previously because he wanted to make use of the blood centipedes to weaken their group. After escaping, Jiang Yu refused to let everyone rest and continued sprinting until their spirit energies were nearly depleted. At their weakest moment, the Great Shang dynasty appeared. Everything was so logical and perfect. "I am Duan Mingda of the Great Shang dynasty. I heard that the 3rd princess of Great Zhou is here, so I've come specially to invite you over as a guest." Even though she was referred to as a guest, they were actually kidnapping Ji Yaoshue forcefully. The person who spoke wore a brocade robe and looked at Ji Yaoshue smugly. Following that, Duan Mingda swept his gaze across the others and let out a cruel smile, saying coldly, "As for the others, they shall be killed without mercy. Prepare for battle." Ji Yaoshue took a deep breath and made a snap decision. "I would rather die in battle than be taken captive. Cultivators of the Great Shang dynasty, you have belittled me." At that moment, the tenderness on Ji Yaoshue's face was gone, replaced with a steely and murderous look. She glanced sideways and whispered, "Zimo, take everyone with you and escape as far as possible. You don't have to care about me." Zimo raised his brows gently and did not reply. Afraid that he wasn't judging the situation properly, Ji Yaoshue continued, "I'm the one they want, so I have to die along with them. However, it's different for you guys. You can survive. Zimo, promise me that you must live on and tell father about what happened today." "Foo-foo." Right then, a cold laugh sounded. Ji Yaoshue took a couple of steps forward and turned around. He looked at Ji Yaoshue and Zimo mockingly and shook his head. "It's too late, 3rd princess. None of you shall escape today." "Jiang Yu, you're indeed the traitor." Ji Yaoshue's expression turned cold. Everyone else from the Great Zhou dynasty were rooted on the spot, yet to understand what was happening. "Commander Jiang, why are you?" Even the Great Zhou guards could not believe what was happening and asked subconsciously. Duan Mingda chuckled softly. "Fellow Taoist Jiang, you have done well for us to be able to take down everyone from the Great Zhou dynasty and even capture a princess." "That's right." Another Great Shang cultivator laughed and nodded. "Your Majesty will surely reward fellow Taoist Jiang immensely for your great contribution. Your future will be bright." "It's over, it's over." Si Yutong's face was ashen as though he had lost his parents as he mumbled repeatedly. The others looked extremely terrible as well. Initially, Jiang Yu was their only support as a 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. But now, their 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator was in the same camp as those from the Great Shang Dynasty. Jiang Yu's next sentence made everyone's hearts sink to the bottom. Ji Yaoxue, you had better give up. Apart from me, Brother Mingda is also at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment. It'll be difficult for you guys to escape even if you have wings. Everyone was shocked. 2 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. After Jiang Yu went over to the other side, Ji Qingtian and the other 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators were the ones with the highest cultivation realms remaining. Their combined strength could not match a single 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. Furthermore, everyone was exhausted and their combat powers were reduced. Ji Yaoxue asked slowly, Jiang Yu, my Ji family has treated you well. Why are you repaying our kindness with ingratitude? Jiang Yu replied, Indeed, the Ji family hasn't let me down. However, I would have died in the ancient battlefield 10 years ago if not for those of the Great Shang Dynasty. So you've already sold your life to the Great Shang Dynasty 10 years ago. So, that's a reason for you to forget about who your benefactors were? To forget who were the ones who brought you onto the path of cultivation and imparted techniques to you? So that's a reason for you to forget about the Ji family's kindness to you. Ji Yaoxue questioned loudly with a sharp gaze, unable to quell the raging flames in her heart. After a moment of silence, Jiang Yu replied expressionlessly and coldly, I don't want to die. So, you guys will have to die. Phew! Ji Yaoxue laughed. Jiang Yu continued, Ji Yaoxue, if you surrender obediently, I can guarantee that you won't suffer. But, you had better not do anything foolish. There's no need to talk further. Let's fight. Let's see what kind of an ending an ungrateful wolf like you will meet in the Great Shang Dynasty. Ji Yaoxue commented icily, Everyone from the Great Shang Dynasty, listen up. If this man can betray the Great Zhou Dynasty, he can do the same to the Great Shang Dynasty. When they heard that, the expressions from the people of the Great Shang Dynasty changed. Duan Mingda's gaze flickered for a brief moment as well. Su Zimo praised internally. Ji Yaoxue's statement was not weaker than any physical weapons. It was a killing remark that struck right at Jiang Yu's vital spot. Chapter 343. Exchange with your lives. Chapter 343. Exchange with your lives. Jiang Yu's expression changed as he said hurriedly, This woman is clearly trying to sow discord between us. Fellow Taoists from the Great Shang Dynasty, let's not fall into her trap. Indeed, anyone could tell that Ji Yaoxue was trying to sow discord. However, the amazing thing about her remark was that even if those from the Great Shang Dynasty did not fall for the trap, it would be difficult for Jiang Yu to gain their trust in the future. In fact, he might even be suspected, doubted and killed later on. Duan Mingda pondered for a moment before smiling. There's no need to worry, fellow Taoist Jiang Yu. You've done a great deed, so why would we suspect you? That's right. The most important thing right now is to kill off this group of Great Zhou cultivators first, another cultivator replied. Suddenly, Duan Mingda's expression changed as he glanced sideways at the distant horizon. There were people coming over. A group of about 60 cultivators was speeding over with a ferocious killing intent. In the blink of an eye they had arrived. It was the Great Xia Dynasty. The crowd gasped. Su Zimo swept his gaze and could not help but frown when he noticed the shock and fear in the eyes of Duan Mingda and the others. By the looks of it, this wasn't communicated between the Great Shang and Great Xia dynasties. However, the Great Xia cultivators arrived right after the Great Shang cultivators. Su Zimo did not believe that such a coincidence could happen in this world. There must be something amiss. With the arrival of the Great Xia cultivators, it was now a three-way fight and the situation instantly became a little strange. Right now, the strength of Great Zhou was the weakest while Great Xia and Great Shang were on par. However, Great Xia and Great Shang were in a confrontational state, both wary of the other, afraid that the other side would stand to gain from their losses. Moreover, the arrival of the Great Xia dynasty was indeed rather strange. If Jiang Yu was the spy and led the great Shang cultivators here, who was the one who brought the great Xia cultivators over? Could it truly be a coincidence? Ji Yaoshue's eyes flickered as she suddenly declared, "Fellow Taoists of the great Xia dynasty, I'm the princess of Great Zhou. May I know who's the commander for your expedition?" From the great Xia camp, their leader was a man clad in steel armor. His expression was cold as he asked in a deep voice, "I am Guai. What do you seek, Princess of Great Zhou?" "Fellow Taoist Gua, I represent Great Zhou to seek an alliance with Great Xia so that we can wipe out the great Shang cultivators." Ji Yaoshue said, "Furthermore, we want nothing from the storage bags and items that are left. The only thing we want is to kill that traitor of Great Zhou." The moment she said that, Duan Mingda and the other great Shang cultivators were startled. Even though there were less than 20 cultivators on the side of Great Zhou, they would definitely be a threat if they were to join forces with Great Xia. The situation was starting to disadvantage the great Shang dynasty. Duan Mingda chuckled and eased the tension in the air before declaring loudly, "Fellow Taoist Guai, the remaining cultivators of Great Zhou are already at the end of their flight and there's nothing to fear. Ji Yaoshue's aim is for us to have an internecine outcome. Fellow Taoists of Great Xia, please do not fall for it." Guai of Great Xia remained silent. He swept his gaze over Su Zimo and the others thoughtfully. A moment later, he suddenly remarked, "How about we join forces to kill the great Zhou cultivators first? As for the spoils of war, our two dynasties can split it evenly." "Of course." When they heard that, Duan Mingda and the others agreed readily with bright eyes. Ji Yaoshue and the others felt their hearts sink. The great Shang dynasty alone was enough to wipe them out, let alone combined with the great Xia dynasty. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. Guai's decision was staggered. It was as though he had only said that after he received an order. The coincidental appearance of the great Xia dynasty coupled with Guai's reaction confirmed Su Zimo's guess that there was a spy within the remaining great Zhou cultivators as well. Furthermore, the status of that spy in the great Xia dynasty was even higher than Guai's. Earlier, that spy had used a special technique to transmit information, causing Guai to come up with the decision of working together with the great Shang dynasty. Subtly, Su Zimo surveyed the remaining great Zhou cultivators. His gaze paused briefly on one of them before looking away. Junhao of Azure Frost Sect. When they heard that Great Xia and Great Shang were joining hands, the great Zhou cultivators were sad, indignant, frustrated and despaired. However, Junhao was the only one who was calm. He was so calm, as though he was not worried about his safety at all. Guai and Duan Mingda's group were still discussing how to share the spoils of war when Su Zimo looked up at the sky and walked over leisurely. "Zimo! Brother!" Ji Yaoshue and the rest were shocked, shouting instinctively. Su Zimo seemed oblivious and arrived not far from Guai and Duan Mingda's group before asking indifferently, "It's getting late. Are you guys done discussing?" This is the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou, a 3-Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. He's in possession of 18 supreme-grade flying swords and a perfect spirit weapon, Blood Quencher. Jiang Yu said in a deep voice. The cultivators of Great Xia and Great Shang fell into an uproar. They looked at Su Zimo with burning eyes, as though they wanted to skin him alive. "Perfect spirit weapon? Are you serious?" Duan Mingda narrowed his gaze and glared at Jiang Yu, enunciating every word. "Absolutely." Jiang Yu nodded. He refined that blood quencher personally in front of everyone during the Great Zhou Dynasty's Sect competition. Duan Mingda turned to Guai and said with a fake smile, "Brother Gua, how should we split that perfect spirit weapon?" A perfect spirit weapon was enough for golden cores to wage a bloody battle. Be it Great Xia or Great Shang, no one would give it up so easily. Guai raised his brow slightly and asked, "What do you suggest, Brother Duan?" "I do have a suggestion." Suddenly, Su Zimo spoke. "Oh, what?" Duan Mingda and Guai turned around and looked at Su Zimo calmly. They did not hide the mockery and sarcasm in their eyes. To the both of them, Su Zimo was like a fish on a chopping board right now. Anyone who wants blood quencher. Suddenly, Su Zimo paused and stomped his feet heavily on the ground. With a loud boom, the ground shook. He charged forward with a flash as a deafening sound echoed from his body. Thunder rumbled. His blood sounded like a tsunami mixed with the sound of tigers and leopards and was extremely terrifying. Exchange! In the blink of an eye, Zimo had already closed in. He roared and said the first word. At the same time, a massive blood-colored saber appeared in his hands. Buzz! 5 spirit patterns shone on the saber in a bedazzling manner like a blazing blood sun. It emanated with a blood stench and a torrential killing intent. The cultivators of Great Xia and Great Shang were taken aback. Duan Mingda and the others who were facing Zimo felt an apocalyptic might surging over that they could not defend against. With Zimo swung his arms and Blood Quencher drew a perfect arc in the air, shining forth with a horrifying bloody glow. Right now, it was too late to dodge. Duan Mingda did not have time to think as he whipped out a protection talisman and crushed it on the spot. Before he could do anything else, Blood Quencher had already descended from above. Lives! Those who wanted Blood Quencher had to exchange for it with their lives. With Zimo's last word, Duan Mingda's body was split into 2 by Blood Quencher and blood splattered everything. Even the protection talisman could not save his life. A 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator was killed with a single cleave. Chapter 344. Charging Ahead. Chapter 344. Charging Ahead. None of the cultivators of the 3 dynasties thought that Zimo would dare strike, let alone expect his strike. Furthermore, they were too close to one another and Duan Mingda was completely unguarded since he knew nothing about Zimo. Even as a 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, he was cleaved into 2 by Zimo and died on the spot. The crowd exploded. Kill! Kill him! The Great Shang cultivators were enraged as they roared with bloodshot eyes. Jiang Yu had witnessed Zimo in action before. The moment Duan Mingda died, he summoned a flying sword and leaped into the air to distance himself from Zimo. However, the other cultivators did not know better and remained standing on the spot, summoning their flying swords that glowed with spirit lights and conjured hand seals. They were prepared to strike at the same time to kill Zimo. Bang! After killing Duan Mingda, Zimo did not pause at all and charged right into the crowd. The cultivator at the front had just summoned his flying sword when his vision blacked out and he was sent flying. Exploding in midair, the person turned into a mist of blood. Pest! All the cultivators gasped when they saw that. A simple collision caused a cultivator to explode. The terrifying power of his burst could compare to an ancient ferocious beast. After devouring the divine dragon, Zimo attained greater mastery of the organ's refinement section. Every single punch and kick possessed a strength of 5,000 kilograms. The body of an ordinary cultivator would not be able to withstand his might in a clash. While he sent that person flying, Zimo swung Blood Quencher and slashed horizontally. Poof! A flash of blood appeared and a huge head flew up. Blood splattered from the broken neck, forming a terrifying sight. Blood Quencher was blood-colored to begin with. After touching blood, the shade on its blade grew brighter and more blindingly red. Everyone, watch out. That person is extremely strong in melee combat. Don't let him get close to you. Jiang Yu rode on his flying sword and shouted from midair. The remaining Great Shang cultivators were fear-stricken and wished that they could curse out loud. What's the point of saying it only now? Their commander for the expedition, Duan Mingda, who was at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment, was already dead. As for Zimo, he was rampaging through the crowd and many cultivators were chopped down by Blood Quencher before they could even soar into the air. Even without Blood Quencher, those people would most likely die if Zimo closed in on them. Now that he had that perfect graded Blood Quencher in his hands, he was just like a tiger who had grown wings. Even if Zimo did not use all his strength, ordinary 4 and 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators would not be able to withstand the might of a single slash from that heavy saber. Instant thunder! Zimo pointed forward and hollered softly, "Instant thunder!" Snap! A deafening sound rumbled from the skies as a thunderbolt as thick as an arm descended instantly. It struck the crowd, turning it into a sparkling sea of lightning. Many cultivators conjured spirit arts instantly to defend against it. Seizing the opportunity, Zimo entered the crowd once more and flickered left and right. Everywhere his saber was pointed, broken limbs would fly as no one could defend against him. The great Shang cultivators at the outer circle summoned 2 flying swords, scurrying into the air on one while pointing the other at Zimo. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Instantly, spirit lights danced the air as beams of light streaked through the air as though there were 1,000 rays. Lowering his body, Zimo sprawled on the ground and slithered through the grass like a snake at an extremely fast speed. The grass swayed, leaving a trail as Zimo's figure was barely discernible. He had dodged more than half of the flying swords. Behind him, mud flew all over as the flying swords left their marks. The remaining dozen or so flying swords were hot on his tail. Suddenly, Zimo's eyes lit up as he rose and channeled his bloodline, causing the sound of tsunami surging to echo from his body. Crackle! As his bloodline churned, his bones shifted endlessly while his tendons twitched and sounded in unison. Instantly, Zimo's body swelled up. Break! He hollered, gripping Bloodquencher tightly as his muscles expanded and knotted together, bursting through his sleeves in an instant. 2 thick arms exerted strength, raising Bloodquencher and cleaving down heavily against the dozen or so incoming flying swords. Clang! Clang! The sound of metal clashing echoed. Right in front of everyone, the dozen or so superior-grade flying swords were snapped into 2 by a single slash of Bloodquencher as they scattered to the ground without luster. Ah! Gasps could be heard from the Great Shang and Great Xia factions. It was way too savage. This was a complete suppression in terms of brute strength and there was no way to resist at all. Zimo's moves were too swift and decisive. In a mere 10 breaths, more than 10 Great Shang cultivators had been killed by Bloodquencher, a 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator included. Everyone from Great Xia stood rooted to the spot, a hint of fear appearing in the depths of their eyes. As for Ji Yaoxue and everyone else, they felt their morale rise instantly. Waving her arm, Ji Yaoxue said in a deep voice, "Everyone, this is a life-and-death battle. Kill the enemies with me and take down the traitor. Kill! Kill! Kill!" Everyone from Ethereal Peak, the 4 great Zhou guards and Xuantian were all feeling invigorated and pumped as they roared and charged forward. Night Spirit's gaze was cold as it surveyed its surroundings. It did not make a move and stayed by Su Xiaoning's side the entire time. 7-star plum. Purple slash. Duality smoke gathering sword. Countless spirit arts collided in midair as the Great Zhou and Great Xia dynasties finally clashed. Little Fatty rode on his flying sword with a gigantic axe in his hand, working with Xuantian of Southern Mountains Sect in sync. The 4 great Zhou guards stayed close to Ji Yaoxue's side and did not dare to leave her alone, merely dealing with the enemies with their flying swords. Explode! Lang Rou shouted softly as her sleeves shook and more than 10 talismans appeared. Thrown into the crowd, they exploded instantly, turning into a gigantic sea of flames that engulfed a few cultivators. Although she was only at 3 Meridian Foundation establishment, Lang Rou's attainment in talismans was truly brilliant. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gotten the #1 spot of the talisman ranking. Even Zimo would not be willing to take on someone like her, who could throw out a large number of talismans with every attack. The few great Shang cultivators did not die on the spot. However, they were severely injured as their skins tore in a bloodied mess while they shrieked endlessly in the sea of flames. Shoo! Shoo! Ji Xuantian of Ethereal Peak released ethereal wings and his flying sword that was at the void level. Unpredictable streams of seemingly imperceptible ripples crossed the sea of flames, killing the shrieking great Shang cultivators. In the blink of an eye, the situation had reversed. The great Zhou faction now had the upper hand and were ferocious. In truth, there was another strong faction on the battlefield that had yet to interfere. Right from the beginning, most of the great Xia cultivators had been eyeing the situation from the sidelines coldly. Gua Yi's gaze was fixed on a cultivator of Great Zhou the entire time. Suddenly, in the chaotic battlefield, Jun Hao of Azure Frost Sect glanced askance at the direction of the Great Xia faction and made a few continuous hand gestures. The gestures were extremely subtle and Gua Yi was the only one who noticed them. Understanding what it meant, Gua Yi raised his arm and shouted, "Go forth and eliminate the remaining survivors of the Great Zhou dynasty." Chapter 345. 3 Slashes. Chapter 345. 3 slashes. Buzz! Zimo was charging through the crowd when he heard a sword slash. His mind throbbed vaguely with a sharp pain as a warning flashed in his heart. The attack was extremely fast and sharp. It could definitely pose a threat to him. A 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator had struck. Clang! Without time to look back, Zimo slashed in reverse and blocked the incoming flying sword. An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing screeched as sparks flew. That attack was extremely strong and Zimo shuddered, killing intent surging into his eyes. There was only a single person who could attack him from that angle. The traitor of the Great Zhou Dynasty, Jiang Yu. Sidestepping, Zimo dodged a couple more flying swords and spun around swiftly. He glared at Jiang Yu, who was not far away in midair, and said with a cold voice, "You have a death wish. Everyone, don't panic. As long as we keep our distance, that person is of no threat." Jiang Yu declared loudly, "I'll hold him back while you guys join forces to kill him." "Someone like you." Zimo laughed coldly and ignored the flying swords and spirit arts coming at his back. Stomping on the ground heavily, he leaped into the air like a rainbow. In midair, Zimo conjured hand seals, and suddenly, a gigantic pair of wings spread out behind him. They surged with spirit light and were lifelike. That was one of Ethereal Peak's 3 major secret skills, ethereal wings. With ethereal wings, Zimo could soar through the skies like golden cores without the need for external objects. His combat skill in the air was now the same as on the ground. Swoosh! Both wings flapped, and in a flash, Zimo brushed by a great Shang cultivator. A bloody scar emerged from that person's neck as blood sprayed out while he fell from his flying sword, already dead. Jiang Yu's eyelid twitched. Even though he was a 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, a full 3 cultivation realms above Zimo, his speed with sword kinesis flight could not match Zimo, who was in possession of ethereal wings. In other words, Jiang Yu could only fight Zimo head-on to see who would have the upper hand. Water Moon Wheel. Jiang Yu conjured hand seals and channeled his spirit energy fervently, forming a round blue full moon that rippled in front of him. It shone with a chilling killing intent and charged forward. Break! Zimo's bloodline rumbled as the power of thunder gathered in his palm, turning into a thunder spear that shimmered with lightning as he threw it towards the full moon. Boom! The 2 spirit arts collided into a huge bang. The lightning spirit energy surged, producing a dizzying oval sphere of energy that illuminated half the sky. They were even. Right from the beginning, Zimo's body had not paused for the slightest bit, and in the blink of an eye, he was 100 feet away from Jiang Yu. Go! Seeing that his spirit art was useless, Jiang Yu controlled his flying sword and pointed forward hurriedly. The sword quivered, turning into a beam of light that shot towards Zimo's face. At the same time, Jiang Yu rode on his flying sword and retreated furiously. His attack was not meant to injure Zimo. It was for Zimo to deal with it head-on. That way, Zimo's speed would naturally decrease and the both of them would be able to maintain a safety distance. No matter how strong Zimo was in melee combat, he would never be able to touch Jiang Yu. To begin with, the speed of a flying sword shot by a 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator was extremely fast. Coupled with the fact that Zimo was charging towards Jiang Yu, that sword reached him almost instantly. If it was anyone else, it would have been almost impossible for them to dodge that sword. They would either be dead or severely injured. However, Zimo had his spirit perception and sensed it almost immediately after Jiang Yu struck. Furthermore, he noticed Jiang Yu's movements and determined the latter's intention instantly. Faced with the incoming flying sword, Zimo did not dodge nor use Blood Quencher. Instead, he extended his jade-white palm. His arm was like an elephant's trunk, strong yet flexible, while his palm was like a cow's tongue, meeting the flying sword softly, a coil and a tremble. Clang! A jarring sound echoed from the sword. As though it was struck by some immense external force, it was almost destroyed. The spirit light on the sword dimmed and it was cast aside by Zimo. When he saw that, Jiang Yu's expression changed starkly as his pupils contracted. He had long known that Zimo's melee combat strength was frightening and he had a strong physique. However, he did not expect it to be this strong. Zimo could actually come forth unharmed while defending against a superior-grade flying sword with his bare hands. That was probably something that only a spirit demon at peak foundation establishment or a pure-blooded ferocious beast could achieve. How could a 3-Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator be in possession of such a strong physique? The entire process seemed very slow upon narration, but in fact, it occurred in the split of a moment. Zimo reached out and tossed the flying sword aside with a coil and a tremble. His wings flapped as the wind howled, but he did not slow down at all and was already 10 feet away from Jiangyu. At this distance, Jiangyu was already a dead man in Zimo's eyes. If he was against the mighty fiend heir of Overlord Palace, Pang Yu, who was similarly skilled in melee combat with an unparalleled physique, Zimo would not have the confidence to kill the latter. However, this cultivator of the great Zhou dynasty was dead for sure. Ah! Jiangyu's heart skipped a beat. When he saw that he could no longer escape, he hurriedly withdrew a defensive gear from his storage bag and strapped it on his arm. It was a pair of steel bracers. Injecting spirit energy into them, the bracers shone with 3 spirit lights. They were superior-grade spirit weapons. Zimo's gaze flashed like lightning as he strode forward. Blood quencher that was in his hand sounded loudly and quivered. Take my slash. Swinging his arm without any stance, Blood Quencher drew a perfect air in the air and descended from above with a horrifying might, flashing down with immense strength. Blood drained from Jiangyu's face as he propped up both arms instinctively. The bracers shone brightly above his head. Clang! There was a deafening sound. Jiangyu's body shuddered and his feet wobbled. Nearly falling from the flying sword, his arms could not withstand the blow and shook while blood oozed from the side of his lips. Good again! Zimo laughed and chopped down with Blood Quencher again. Clang! Jiangyu's arms were nearly split apart and the sharpness of Blood Quencher was almost at his head. The blood stench emitted from the blade was suffocating. The spirit light of his bracers flickered. After 2 consecutive slashes from Blood Quencher, that superior-grade spirit weapon was almost done for. Die! Zimo spat out coldly. As soon as he said that, Blood Quencher descended once more heavily against Jiangyu's arms. Crack, crack, crack. A series of cracks could be heard from within the bracers. Right after, Jiangyu's eyes dimmed as he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, his arms collapsing. Blood Quencher descended and a cold blade sliced through Jiangyu's head, causing a bloody scar. Shing! Jiangyu's body split into 2 as he fell alongside the flying sword beneath him, blood and organs splattering everywhere. Another 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator had died to Blood Quencher. Chapter 346. Zimo's Lifeline. Chapter 346. Zimo's Lifeline. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Flying swords streaked through the air one after another like shooting stars, shuttling through the crowd as the sounds of spirit arts colliding sounded. The entire battlefield was in chaos. The main reason why the Great Zhou faction could gain a momentary respite and upper hand in the clash against Great Shang was because Zimo had charged forth and slain Duan Mingda while attracting the attention of most of the Great Shang cultivators. In reality, Ji Yaoxue and the rest were thoroughly exhausted after escaping from the blood centipedes and the long journey thereafter. With the addition of the Great Xia dynasty, Ji Yaoxue and the others were in a precarious situation. The 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator of the Great Xia dynasty, Guai, had his sights fixed on Ji Xuantian of Ethereal Peak right away. After all, Ji Xuantian was a 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator who was well versed in the 3 secret skills of Ethereal Peak. He was quite a tricky target with deal with given his agility and swordsmanship. The moment Guai attacked, spirit arts and flying swords were thrown out at the same time, unleashing a flurry of attacks as he wanted to kill Ji Xuantian as quickly as possible. Swash! A beam of light streaked across the air, piercing towards Ji Xuantian who was in midair. Guai was a skilled swordsman and possessed strong spirit energy. As such, the speed of his flying sword was extremely fast and not inferior compared to Ji Xuantian who had cultivated ethereal sword. Ji Xuantian's expression changed. If he was in his peak condition, he could attempt to dodge the attack using ethereal wings. However, by the time he sensed the sharpness of the sword chi, it was already too late to dodge. He could only wave his robes and summon flying swords to defend against the incoming attack. Clang! Two flying swords revealed themselves as they exchanged sharp blows, gliding against the other's blade while letting out a jarring sound and a stream of sparks. Xuantian's flying sword was a supreme-grade flying sword that Zimo had gifted him. However, he was weaker than Xueqi in terms of cultivation realm. Coupled with the fact that he was in an exhausted state, it was only natural that he was disadvantaged against Xueqi. At the same time, Xueqi's flying sword was a little strange. Unlike ordinary flying swords, it was three-pronged. The three-pronged sword had two holes that could hold down flying swords, sabers and the likes. Right now, Xuantian's flying sword was locked down by Xueqi's three-pronged sword and quivered immensely, unable to break free. Hee hee. Xueqi scoffed coldly as 6 spirit meridians appeared vaguely discernible beneath his shirt and spirit energy gushed rapidly like a river. With a clang, Xuantian's supreme-grade flying sword was repelled by Xueqi's three-pronged sword and fell to the ground not far away. The three-pronged sword continued stabbing with the momentum. In a hurry, Xuantian flapped his ethereal wings hastily to sidestep the attack, but he was a step too slow. With a loud thud, a deep wound appeared on his shoulder, revealing his bones as blood flowed out like a fountain. His ethereal wings were pierced by the sword as well, shattering on the spot. Bang! Landing heavily on the ground, Xuantian clenched his teeth and groaned, breaking out in cold sweat from the pain. "Senior brother G!" Little Fatty and the others yelled. Shoo! The three-pronged sword attacked and stabbed straight at Xuantian's head. Ah! With a furious howl, Little Fatty shook off the cultivators around him and swung his gigantic axe fiercely at the three-pronged sword. Clang! The three-pronged sword shone brightly and its blade quivered, repelling the gigantic axe instantly. Little Fatty was only at 3 Meridian Foundation establishment, a full 3 cultivation realms beneath Xueqi, so he was naturally not a match for Xueqi in terms of strength. If not for the fact that he had trained his physique regularly, the gigantic axe would have flown out of his hands. Even so, Little Fatty's palm was still torn and bled from the vibration. Swash! A few talismans landed in front of Xuantian and suddenly shattered, forming layers of barrier. It was Lung Ro who had tossed out a couple of protection talismans. Crack! 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 The three-pronged sword pierced a few barriers consecutively before stopping. Xuantian also seized the opportunity to leave the spot and was out of immediate danger. "I don't have many talismans left," Lung Ro whispered. Almost all of the remaining Great Zhou cultivators, apart from Su Xiaoning, were injured. Surrounded in the midst of the Great Xia faction, they were almost at their limits. Suddenly, 3 reverberating bangs rang out from the air not far away. Many cultivators looked towards the voice instinctively and saw yet another 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, Jiang Yu, falling from midair after being slashed by Zimo. Pest! All the cultivators were shocked. Duan Mingda's death could have been attributed to his carelessness of underestimating the enemy. However, Jiang Yu's death was full proof of Zimo's strength. It was definitely not a simple coincidence for a 3 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator to kill 2 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators in a row. In midair, Zimo could sense the change in the situation as he turned around slowly, sweeping over the battlefield with a cold gaze. "Great Xia Dynasty, you guys truly have a death wish." Before his sentence was finished, Zimo had already flapped his wings while dragging the bloodied blood quencher, charging towards the Great Xia cultivators. The crowd exploded in an instant and a commotion broke out. Zimo slew 2 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators in a row and his aura right now was torrential, with an intense bloodlust and killing intent that was almost materialized emanating from his body. Who would dare go against someone like that? No one even dared to meet his eyes. Bang! A Great Xia cultivator stood in midair on his flying sword and was unable to dodge in time. It took a single collision against Zimo for him to die on the spot without even being able to make a sound. In the blink of an eye, Zimo arrived before Xueqi. Swoosh! Blood quencher descended from above and the massive blade seemed as though it wanted to rip the void apart. Its monumental aura was unstoppable. Xueqi looked terrible as he waved both hands to hurriedly maneuver his 3-pronged sword over as a defense. Clang! The saber and sword collided and the whole of the 3-pronged sword held down blood quencher. Xueqi's eyes lit up as he channeled spirit energy fervently. All 6 spirit meridians of his shone with a boundless spirit light, and his dantian was throbbing in pain. As long as I can repel this blood quencher, Zimo will not be a threat at all. To Xueqi, the perfect spirit weapon was the reason for Zimo's terrifying combat strength. Hands off! Xueqi bellowed. Hands off! Zimo sneered and his bloodline rumbled. Channeling spirit energy, the 5 spirit patterns on his saber shone with a divine and bloody light, resembling a blood sun that shone with endless rays. Clang! Clang! Against the suppression of blood quencher, the 3-pronged sword's spirit light flickered. It looked like it could crumble at any moment. Shatter! Zimo roared, and with a twist of his arm, the saber trembled. Crack! Crack! The 3-pronged sword creaked as cracks appeared on the blade, and it shattered on the spot. Xueqi was scared out of his wits and retreated hastily, his gaze landing on a great show cultivator nearby. When Junhao saw that, his pupils constricted as well. Their plan had failed. Zimo was way more terrifying than he had expected. They were bound to suffer a massive loss if that man did not die. Even if they managed to escape, their forces would be severely crippled and they would not be able to fight for treasures against other factions in the ancient battlefield. While Zimo was strong, Junhao was convinced that all humans had weaknesses. As long as he could locate Zimo's lifeline, he could deal a fatal blow to the latter. Narrowing his gaze, he caught sight of Xuantian at the side and his eyes shimmered. Chapter 347. Direct Death. Chapter 347. Direct Death. Hidden in the crowd, Junhao gestured towards the direction of the Great Xia faction before pointing at Xuantian beside him. 10 armored cultivators from the Great Xia faction understood his intentions and exchanged glances before nodding in secret. The 10 of them separated and mixed into the crowd. 5 of them wore light armor and controlled their flying swords while releasing spirit arts to attract the attention of everyone else. The other 5 cultivators wore heavy armor and were fully geared from head to toe. The armor alone weighed around 500 kilograms. It was obvious that those 5 on the ground were body-tempered cultivators. They wielded daggers and split up in different directions, approaching Xuantian stealthily. In midair, Zimo swung Blood Quencher and tore into the crowd, ripping a bloodied path by chopping up all cultivators who stood before him. Even 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators could not withstand a single slash from Zimo. Throughout the entire process, Zimo's eyes were fixed on Xueqi. That was the only 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator on the battlefield. As long as he was dead, the others would naturally collapse. Zimo noticed that some Great Xia cultivators were behaving oddly. However, he merely glanced at them indifferently while continuing to hunt down Xueqi with a raised saber. At the same time, Xueqi could sense Zimo's killing intent. He knew clearly well that he was definitely not a match for Zimo in a one-on-one fight. However, he had a way to secure victory. His only chance was a girl from the Great Zhou faction who was only at mid-stage Foundation establishment. If that girl met with danger, Zimo would naturally be distracted and reveal openings. At that time, it would be easy to take advantage of his weakness and kill him on the spot. If they could capture that girl alive, the situation would be even simpler. At that thought, Xueqi took a deep breath and composed himself. A look of conviction flashed in his eyes. It depended on who was faster. If Zimo killed him faster, there was nothing he could complain about. However, if that mid-stage Foundation establishment girl were to land in their hands first, Zimo would be doomed and the Great Zhou dynasty was bound to fall as well. To Xueqi, the girl was already a bird in a cage. Most of the Great Zhou cultivators around here had already been lured away, leaving a mere black wolf-like demon beast that was of no threat. Come on! Xueqi was confident and no longer retreated. He retrieved a protection talisman from his storage bag and crushed it on the spot. At the same time, he summoned a glistening glass mirror and held it above his head. Swoosh! Blood Quencher came at him in a clean cut. Xueqi's expression was resolute as streams of rich spirit energy rippled out of his fingertips, entering the glass mirror. The glass mirror expanded rapidly in a shade of dazzling gold like the sky, covering Xueqi's head. Clang! A distant sound echoed when Blood Quencher struck the glass mirror, resembling the bell of an old temple. Xueqi managed to block that slash momentarily with the glass mirror. However, his body shook violently and the power of the protection talisman dispersed in the aftershock. It was at that moment that Xueqi truly realized just how terrifying the power of Zimo's slash was. Before he could catch his breath, a second slash descended. A bloody glow crashed down, as though it wanted to split the sky above him. Xueqi was horrified as he glanced askance. Suddenly, his eyes went wild with joy when he caught sight of a scene on the other side of the battlefield. They made their move. The 5 great Xia cultivators had already made their move. Ha ha ha! Zimo, take a look. Your sister is about to die. Xueqi was laughing in a maniacal manner and his features were almost contorted. Right after, his laughter stopped and his heart sank. Zimo's blood quencher did not stop at all. His eyes were calm and there was no trace of panic or worry in them at all. In fact, Zimo did not even turn to look. How could that be? What went wrong? Xueqi looked to the other side of the battlefield instinctively. The next moment, his eyes were widened in shock, as though he had just witnessed the scariest thing in the world. His mouth opened up but he could not say a single word. It was as if someone had grabbed his throat. The 5 heavy-armored great Xia cultivators formed an encirclement around Xuantian and were less than 10 feet away. All 5 of their gazes were subconsciously fixed on the demon beast beside her. It was covered with a cold, indestructible scale armor from head to toe and its tail was like a steel whip, carrying a sharp spike that shone with a chilling aura at its tip. Ever since the start of the battle, the demon beast had been by the girl's side and had never made a move. Right now, it was sprawled on the ground motionlessly. Even after a long time, its eyes seemed like they were closed, as though it was lazily asleep. The 5 of them glanced at the demon beast. Junhao gave a subtle nod. Attack! One of them shouted softly and the 5 of them split up in different directions. Charging forward at the same time, they arrived before Xuantian within a couple of steps. Junhao, who was watching at the side, pretended to be shocked and exclaimed, "Watch out!" In truth, it was too late even if the cultivators nearest to Xuantian jumped in to assist her. A smug look flashed through Junhao's eyes. All of a sudden, Night Spirit, who was initially sprawled beside Xuantian, opened its eyes, letting out 2 cold rays of light. Instantly, the temperature of the battlefield seemed to have dipped. It rose and with a single leap, extended a pair of front paws to welcome 2 incoming cultivators. Sharp claws extended stealthily from the gap between its fingers and shone with a cutting glint and a cold aura. A ferocious aura that was asphyxiating burst forth. Night Spirit was way too fast. The 2 of them merely felt their visions blur before one of them died on the spot with blood gushing out of his ripped throat. There were 5 holes in the steel helmet of the other person. Night Spirit had ripped through it and the person collapsed limply on the ground with brain juice flowing out. A black shadow streaked through the void. It was like a snake in the night, coiling around the throat of a cultivator before ripping forcefully. Crack, crack, crack. The person's throat was snapped on the spot. Immediately after, the black shadow continued darting around. Poof! One of the cultivators seemed to have been pierced by a steel whip as a cold light shone from his back. It was Night Spirit's tail. Heavy and steel armors were akin to paper against Night Spirit's claws and could not withstand a single blow. Snap! At the same time, Night Spirit opened its mouth and lunged forward, biting at the throat of the 5th cultivator. Tilting its head slightly, the person's head was snapped and fresh blood splattered everywhere. Everything had happened too quickly. It took less than a breath of time since Night Spirit took action. Furthermore, everything seemed to have been done at the same time. Even Zimo could not accomplish something like that. Every single part of Night Spirit's body was built to kill. In the blink of an eye, 5 great Xia cultivators were dead on the spot. All of them had widened eyes that were filled with confusion. Even at the last moment, they did not know what they had just encountered. Chapter 348. Defeated Departure. Chapter 348. Defeated Departure. The strong stench of blood filled the air, making one sick. Night Spirit's attacks caused the entire battlefield to pause for a moment. Junhao did not blink at all as his pupils constricted, focusing his sights on the 5 great Xia cultivators who were filled with blood from head to toe. He was seemingly shocked silly. All of a sudden, turning around slowly, Night Spirit's cold gaze landed on Jun Hao. Instantly, Jun Hao's breathing halt. For a brief moment, he felt as though his heart was gripped by an invisible hand. Night Spirit walked slowly and arrived before Jun Hao. Jun Hao's mind was blank right now as his limbs went cold. He could not move at all. Night Spirit's body was much taller than Jun Hao's and it was looking down at him from above. There was a cold intent in its eyes while its chilling tail swayed like a ghost at the back. Against Night Spirit, Jun Hao felt extremely pathetic, like an ant that could be stepped on at any moment. Horrified, cold sweat began rolling down his cheeks. His arms were trembling uncontrollably. Gripping his fists tightly, Jun Hao clenched his teeth to suppress the fear in his heart. To his shock, that only caused his arms to tremble even more violently. Night Spirit, hurry back! Suddenly, a girl's voice sounded. Pausing for a moment, Night Spirit looked at Jun Hao indifferently. There was a hint of warning and a tinge of disdain within its eyes. It then turned around and slowly returned to the girl's side. The departure of that terrifying demon beast had Jun Hao feeling as though he had just brushed by the gates of hell. His clothes were drenched with sweat and he was weak all over, almost collapsing to the ground. He looked at Night Spirit with lingering fear. The violent demon beast that had let out its menacing claws earlier on was now sprawled obediently beside the girl, even letting her pet him with her jade-white hands. The girl's crisp voice sounded, "Thank you so much, Night Spirit. However, you can't go around scaring others. You have to be obedient." Night Spirit let out a deep growl as a form of acknowledgement. Right after, the girl turned towards Jun Hao and smiled apologetically. "Senior brother Jun, sorry. That's the way Night Spirit is. Please don't take it to heart." It's fine," Jun Hao replied instinctively. Earlier on, he had truly sensed the killing intent from that demon beast called Night Spirit. If the girl hadn't called it back, he might be dead right now. The girl chuckled and continued, "Thank you for your warning just now, Senior Brother Jun." "It's only right, huh? Ha ha." Jun Hao laughed dryly. Even though he had no mirror, he could sense how stiff his smile was. He felt a sense of relief. He merely gave that fake warning earlier on because he did not want to expose his identity prematurely. By the looks of it, he seemed to have gained Su Xiaoning's trust instead with his actions. Of course, even so, Jun Hao no longer dared harbor designs on Su Xiaoning. The demon beast at her side was way too terrifying. In fact, Jun Hao suspected that the reason why the demon beast was so hostile towards him was because it had sensed something. Darned beast! He cursed internally. On the battlefield, Blood Quencher crushed down with a scarlet glow as the sky that was formed from the glass mirror shattered, forming a huge crack. Crack, crack, crack. In the blink of an eye, the crack multiplied into its surroundings, covering the entire sky densely. The glass mirror was shattered. Guai fell from the sky and coughed with blood. He was looking at Night Spirit with widened eyes, filled with fright. The fact that Night Spirit had killed 5 great Xia cultivators also implied that he had lost his lifeline. Immediately after, Zimo cut down casually onto Guai's head. At this point, all 3 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators had died. The cultivators of the Great Xia and Great Shang factions were instantly defeated as they let out shouts and fled in all directions. With his ethereal wings, Zimo streaked through the skies and a scarlet glow shone repeatedly. Finally, he relented after killing more people continuously. The cultivators of the 2 dynasties fled in various directions, and it was impossible if he wanted to eliminate them all. Furthermore, it would waste time if he were to continue hunting them. They were in the ancient battlefield after all, and it was already getting late. Zimo was worried about other stuff. Finally, the battle royale between the 3 dynasties ended with the defeat of the Great Shang and Great Xia dynasties. Even though the Great Zhou dynasty was victorious, it was a tragic victory. Initially, Ji Yaoxue had 4 Great Zhou guards protecting here, but the battle cost 2 of them. Right now there were 11 people remaining: Zimo and his sister, Ji Qingtian, Lang Rou and Little Fatty of Ethereal Peak, Ji Yaoxue and 2 Great Zhou guards, Junhao of Azure Frost Sect, Shijian of Southern Mountain Sect and Si Yutong of Iridescent Clouds Palace. Of course, there was also Night Spirit. Out of the 11 of them, apart from Su Zimo, Su Xiaoning, Ji Yaoxue and Junhao, the other 7 were covered in blood and had injuries. Su Zimo said in a low voice, "Everyone, pack up and leave this place as soon as possible." "That's easy for you to say. How can we move?" Si Yutong grumbled, "We're all injured now, suffering from pain everywhere and thoroughly exhausted. There's no way we can use sword kinesis flight." Su Zimo swept his gaze at him. Recalling the methods of this man before him, Si Yutong could not help but shudder and shut up. Ji Yaoxue asked softly, "Zimo, should we rest here first?" "No." Su Zimo shook his head. "So many people died in this battle and the stench of blood is spreading. Many ancient living beings will definitely be attracted here, so we must not linger." After surviving a year in Songlang Mountain Range, Su Zimo was clear of the rules there. However, the ancient battlefield was 10 times crueler than Songlang Mountain Range. When they heard that, everyone's heart skipped a beat as they could not help but look fearful upon recalling the moment they came across the blood centipedes. Su Zimo continued, "It's already close to evening now. If we don't look for a place to settle down before night, there's a high chance we'll find ourselves surrounded by ancient living beings. What should we do then?" As the skies darkened, the cultivators were also starting to feel uneasy and nervous. None of them had any ideas. Before entering the ancient battlefield, they were warned repeatedly by many seniors that birds, beasts and terrifying living beings roamed the ancient battlefield at night. This was not a place where they should wander at night, or they would definitely be met with death. Pondering in silence for a moment, Su Zimo started moving to collect the storage bags of the other 2 dynasties. He would open every single storage bag for a look. "Humph, someone was in a hurry to leave, but he's already busy collecting the spoils of war now," Si Yutong could not help but remark softly. Little Fatty said coldly, "Si Yutong, don't forget. If my bro didn't attack, you would have long been dead." Ji Yaoxue nodded as well. "It's only right that those storage bags belong to Zimo." She paused for a moment and continued, "However, I've got a feeling that he's looking for something." Right then, Su Zimo's eyes lit up as he retrieved an exquisite spirit vessel from one of the storage bags. Injecting spirit energy into it, the spirit vessel expanded instantly and hovered in front of everyone. "Let's go. We'll board this spirit vessel and leave this place." Su Zimo waved. When they saw the spirit vessel, everyone was enlightened and exchanged glances. It was as though a rock had been lifted off their shoulders as they looked at Su Zimo with gratitude. Chapter 349, Clues of the Ruins. Chapter 349, Clues of the Ruins. At the borders of the ancient battlefield, a spirit light streaked through the air at an extremely fast speed. If one focused their gaze, they would be able to make out faintly a spirit vessel carrying 10 cultivators and a demon beast. At the bow of the vessel, a green-robed cultivator stood steering its direction. The green-robed cultivator was Su Zimo. On the spirit vessel, the injured cultivators had already bandaged their wounds simply and changed into new sets of robes. Only, they still looked pale, fatigued and weak. Everyone looked at the green-robed cultivator at front, filled with emotions and deep thoughts. It could be said that they would have all been dead for this ancient battlefield expedition if not for him. Right now, they did not even have the strength to ride on their flying swords. However, even after slaying 3 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators in the battle, Su Zimo had the energy to control the spirit vessel, carrying everyone with it. His physique was truly something that shocked everyone. There was a hint of fear in the depths of Junhao's eyes. Before long, the spirit vessel stopped at the foot of a mountain. Leaping down, Su Zimo found a cave at the foot of the mountain based on the map. It was spacious inside and they could settle down temporarily. Once everyone entered the cave, Su Zimo guarded the entrance to lay down formations. Even though everyone had stopped the bleeding from their injuries, the stench of blood would still spread. The living beings of the ancient era were extremely sensitive to such a smell and would definitely find their way here. Therefore, Su Zimo had to lay down some simple array formations at the entrance of the cave to isolate the sounds and auras within before adding concealment formations. It was only then that they could be considered safe. These were all support formations and were relatively simple. Before night arrived, Zimo was already done with them. Xueqi came over and said, "Zimo, let's take turns standing guard tonight." "That's right, bro. Take a rest tonight and we'll take turns standing guard. Don't worry." Little Fatty patted his chest and declared confidently. Throughout the entire process, everyone did not help much. They felt embarrassed and wanted to try their best to share Zimo's burden. "There's no need." Zimo waved his hand. "Rest well and regain your strength as soon as possible. Night Spirit will guard over here." At the mention of Night Spirit, a look of fear flickered through everyone's eyes. Even though it merely attacked for a brief moment during the battle in the day, it was way too shocking. If the feeling that Zimo gave off to everyone was one of unpredictability, the feeling that Night Spirit gave off was one of fear. Nighttime. On this day, everyone had been through too much and were worn out physically and mentally. Now that they were finally relaxed, most of them fell asleep. Night Spirit rose and walked out of the cave stealthily. It melted into the darkness and vanished. Zimo was not worried about Night Spirit. Its strength right now was equivalent to the peak of Foundation establishment. Furthermore, they were at the borders of the ancient battlefield right now and there was nothing that could threaten it. Sitting quietly in the cave, Zimo tidied the day's gains. There were a total of 60 storage bags. Even though there were no supreme-grade spirit weapons within them, there were many superior-grade spirit weapons and plenty of elixirs. He chose a couple of perfect-grade elixirs and put them away for his own use while placing the rest together. After tidying everything, Zimo took out a few maps and matched them. A fragrance wafted over as Xueqi came over and sat down beside him. "What's wrong? You can't get to sleep?" Zimo turned his head slightly and asked in a soft voice. In the darkness, Xueqi pursed her lips and whispered, "Zimo, thank you for today." "It's fine." He smiled. Xueqi relaxed at the sight of Zimo's smile and asked curiously, "What are you looking at?" "You came at the right time. Do you know of any clues to the ancient ruins?" he asked. Cultivating in the ancient battlefield was only one aspect. More importantly, it was obtaining the Meridian Unlocking Elixir along with other treasures and inheritances. All of those items only existed within the ruins of the ancient battlefield. "No." Xueqi shook her head. "Most of the ruins around the borders of the ancient battlefield have been looted entirely and there are few that are undiscovered. Take a look at this." Zimo opened up the few maps in his hands and placed it before Xueqi, pointing to a red dot. "This location has been indicated on these few maps. I suspect that this is an ancient ruin that was discovered by the Great Shang and Great Xia dynasties." "Indeed." Xueqi held up the few maps and matched them before nodding. Even though she was moved, there was a look of worry in her eyes. "We're currently short-handed. This ruin will definitely attract many factions and cultivators, leading to a cruel battle." "It's all right." Zimo smiled gently. "There are no powerful sects and top-tier cultivators at the borders of the ancient battlefield. Furthermore, we've already destroyed a large part of the Great Shang and Great Xia dynasties' strength. They won't be a threat." "When should we set off?" Xueqi asked. 10 days from now." Zimo replied in a deep voice. "Heal your injuries in the 10 days and stabilize your cultivation realm. Once everyone has recovered, we'll set off." The two of them chatted a little more before Xueqi went back to rest upon Zimo's persuasion. Shifting his gaze, he looked towards Junhao in the crowd. He had a vague feeling that there was something amiss about Junhao. However, he could not kill the latter just because he looked strange without concrete evidence. However, Zimo was certain that there was a great Xia dynasty spy of high status among the people remaining. Retracting his gaze, he smiled gently. No matter who the spy was, that person would not dare to behave recklessly from today on. Those tricks were nothing but a joke in the face of absolute strength. Late at night, a dark shadow entered from outside the cave stealthily without alerting anyone. Sensing something, Zimo opened his eyes and glanced at Night Spirit. He could sense a blood stench emanating from Night Spirit's body, and it was somewhat familiar. It was the blood centipede King Zora. In that 6 hours, Night Spirit had returned to that desert and killed the blood centipede king. Zimo chuckled. He was the only one who could guess what Night Spirit was thinking. In the day, Night Spirit had to protect Xuantian and could not venture too far. It was most likely fed up that it could only run from those blood centipedes. Now that Zimo was guarding this place at night, Night Spirit went over and killed that blood centipede king straight. Rising, Zimo nodded to Night Spirit. The two of them had a tacit understanding. Now that Night Spirit had returned and was guarding the cave, Zimo left the place. Due to the soundproof formation, it was quiet within the cave. The moment he left the cave, Zimo heard the roars of beasts and the cries of birds. The world shook, the trees swayed and the grass rustled. It was as though there was some terrifying existence nearby that was absolutely frightening. It was a completely different world inside and outside the cave. Despite being in such an environment, Zimo did not show the slightest trace of fear. Instead, he looked slightly excited and his blood was rumbling. At night, the world belonged to the ancient demon beasts. However, it also belonged to Zimo. After all, from a certain perspective, Zimo was a demon. Chapter 350, 7 Orifices. Chapter 350, 7 Orifices. After many years of cultivation, Zimo had already made it a habit to only cultivate the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness at night. He had already attained greater mastery of the organs refinement section, and had been cultivating the orifice clearing section for some time now. The orifices referred to the 7 on a person's head. For the majority of races, their heads were the most mysterious, important and sensitive part of their bodies. Most beings would die instantly if their heads suffered immense damage. Legend has it that the Purple Residence, Heavenly Palace and Immortal Stage acupoints were located on the head. Even the essence spirit of the immortal Tao and the Een spirit of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness were located in the depths of the head. However, that was a point Zimo had not reached given his current cultivation realm. In the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, the cultivation of the head came after cultivation of the skin, flesh, tendons, bones, marrow and 5 organs. It was also a clear indication of the importance of the head. The 7 orifices of the head referred to the eyes, ears, nose, mouth and tongue. The mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness had to be cultivated one after another without any mistake in the order. If the 5 organs were not in harmony, the 7 orifices could not open up. One could only clear their orifices after refining their organs. By refining their organs, one could produce the essence chi of their organs, the so-called demonic chi. Once the 5 organs resonated with the 7 orifices, demonic chi would naturally pass through the orifices as well. Between the 5 organs and 7 orifices, the liver corresponded to the eyes, the kidney to the ears, the lungs to the nose, the spleen to the mouth and the heart to the tongue. In other words, the essence chi of the 5 organs would clear through their corresponding orifices. The nurturing of demonic chi to flow through the orifices would allow one to attain lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section. At that point, they would be able to reach the realm of universal sight and hearing. Prior to this, the skin, flesh, tendons, bones and marrow would correspond to the 5 organs and form a minor heavenly cycle within the body. After clearing the 7 orifices, the skin, flesh, tendons, bones and marrow, 5 organs and 7 orifices will tri-correspond and form a major heavenly cycle within the body. At that point, greater mastery of the orifice clearing section will be achieved. By cultivating to that point, it would also mean that one would be able to form a demon inner core. Orifice clearing did not merely mean that one would be able to strengthen their vision, hearing and the 5 senses. More than that, it was for the 7 orifices to connect through to the skin, flesh, tendons, bones and marrow as well as the 5 organs, raising the strength of one's physique. Furthermore, after one attained greater mastery of the orifice clearing section, a major heavenly cycle would be formed in their body. That way, Zimo's body would be more coordinated and harmonious. He would be agile as a swallow while carrying the weight of a bear. His movements and stability would coexist, melding toughness and gentleness. Meek as a virgin, he could burst like a rabbit. Every single movement of his 4 limbs would gather his entire body's power into a single spot, causing his strength to rise immensely. At the end of the orifice clearing section, you left a sentence. At this point of your cultivation, you would have perfected your technique and cultivated universal sight and hearing. With the help of the spirit perception, you will be able to avoid danger without seeing or smelling it. Be it whether you're moving, sitting, or lying down, your heart will be able to sense and you will be able to defeat your enemies within 10 feet with your bare hands. Each time he saw the statement "die you left behind," Zimo felt his blood boil. In other words, that sentence meant that he was invincible within 10 feet. Furthermore, Zimo believed that the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness truly did possess such a capability. Although he had not attained greater mastery of the orifice clearing section, if he were to release his blood chi without hiding his demonic cultivation, there were truly not many cultivators who could go against him in an all-out battle within 10 feet. Zimo arrived at the slope above the cave and swallowed a perfect-grade blood-flesh elixir. Assuming a lotus position, he closed his eyes and rich demonic chi gushed out from his breathing and exhalation, gathering around his body. Before entering the ancient battlefield, Zimo had already cleared 4 of the 7 orifices: his ears, tongue and nose. Right now, he was cultivating on clearing his mouth. 4 demon beasts like the heaven spirit lizard and the essence-devouring frog, their tongues were their greatest killing weapons. They could kill their enemies in a single breath and their strength would naturally increase immensely after clearing their tongue orifice. However, Zimo was a human after all, and the increase to his combat strength after clearing his ears, nose and tongue orifices was not that obvious. But the mouth orifice was different. Zimo had cultivated a sound secret skill: Thunderclap Kill. Even though it was an incomplete version, Zimo's breathing was long and his lungs were strong. Once he cleared his mouth and nose orifices, the might of Thunderclap Kill was bound to increase further. That was a true killing technique, and it was also a trump card for Zimo. On the slope, demonic chi surged into the sky, emanating a terrifying aura. If anyone were to see this, they would be shocked to see a vaguely visible human sitting in the midst of that thick demonic chi. At the borders of the ancient battlefield, there were almost no ancient living beings or demon beasts that could injure Night Spirit. Naturally, that also meant that only a rare few of them could hurt Zimo. Most demon beasts chose to avoid the mountain when they sensed that formidable demonic chi. A night passed and not a single demon beast showed up around the cave. When morning arrived, Zimo took a deep breath of air and the rumbling demonic chi re-entered his body through his nose and mouth. He opened his eyes and rose. When he stretched, his tendons and bones echoed at the same time with a series of crisp cracks. It was extremely bright. By the time Zimo returned to the cave, Xueqi and the others were already awake. "I told everyone else about our decision. We'll head out 10 days from now," Xueqi came forward and said. "All right." Zimo nodded. The cultivators grabbed some food casually and hurried to make good use of time to cultivate. It was the same for Zimo as well. The moment he entered the ancient battlefield yesterday, he felt his 4th meridian surfacing vaguely. Coupled with that massive battle, it would probably take a few more days at most for him to unlock his 4th spirit meridian completely. During this period of time, Yutong took a walk outside and upon returning, said with a serious tone, "This cave is really well hidden. Even after last night, there are no signs of birds or beasts nearby." Most people did not have any reaction when they heard that. However, some of them looked at Zimo thoughtfully. For the next few days, Zimo continued to head out at night and cultivated his mouth orifice. In the day, he would be in the cave, absorbing spirit chi to unlock his 4th spirit meridian. On the 7th day, a loud bang echoed from Zimo's body. Boom! Beneath his green robes, the 4th spirit meridian shone brightly and was crystal clear. Within it, spirit energy gushed, producing the sound of a tsunami wave. He was now a 4-meridian foundation establishment cultivator on the 7th day. On the 8th day, Xuantian reached late-stage foundation establishment. On the 9th day, Lang Ro and Little Fatty unlocked their 4th spirit meridian as well. The few of them had the lowest cultivation realm. After entering the ancient battlefield, they benefited the most from the immensely rich spirit chi and were the first ones to break through. On the 10th day, someone else broke through. Xuantian of Ethereal Peak unlocked his 6th spirit meridian. Starting from the 4th spirit meridian, it was increasingly difficult to unlock further meridians. In fact, Many cultivators were stuck at 3 Meridian Foundation establishment for their entire lives without being able to advance. There were a few reasons why Xuantian was the first among the 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators to break through. In part, it was because he had accumulated enough resources and built up a strong foundation. Next, it was thanks to the secret skill of Ethereal Peak, Ethereal Foundation establishment. Most importantly, he had a close brush with death in that battle 10 days ago. That triggered the potential of life from deep within his body, allowing him to have his current breakthrough. After 10 days, Zimo's group's strength had increased. As such, everyone's confidence in the expedition towards the ancient ruins increased as well. Seeing that everyone was ready, Zimo waved and dispersed the array formation of the cave, declaring in a deep voice, "Let's go." Chapter 351, Great Yu Dynasty. Chapter 351, Great Yu Dynasty. Zimo and the rest sped towards the ancient ruins marked on the map. During this period of time, they were attacked by birds, beasts and ancient living beings as well. Thankfully, they managed to survive and reached the vicinity of the ancient ruins after 3 days. Many cultivators were gathered at the foot of a steep mountain. They were all dressed differently and it was clear that they were from different sects and factions. The seal of this cave abode is getting weaker. We'll probably be able to remove the seal before night falls. That's right. It won't be in vain that we've waited here for so long. Some of the groups contained dozens of people, but there were also small groups of less than 3. A single glance revealed that there were hundreds of people, either whispering in hushed tones or conversing loudly. Apart from Zimo's group, there were also other cultivators gathering towards this place and the crowd was increasing. Through the other cultivators, Zimo's group got to know that there was a concealment formation surrounding this ancient ruin previously. The cultivators who had entered the ancient battlefield previously did not manage to discover this place and that's why it was preserved. As time passed by, the concealment formation could no longer hold out and dissipated, revealing signs of the ruin. As such, the number of cultivators that discovered it increased. However, there was still a sort of seal surrounding the ruin that no one was able to dispel. Hence, they could only wait for it to dissipate on its own. By the looks of it, this should be a cave abode left behind by a golden core. I wonder what treasures are inside. Hopefully, there's a Meridian unlocking elixir. Of course, it'll be even better if there are supreme-grade spirit weapons. Perhaps there's even a perfect spirit weapon. Yes, looking at the seal outside this cave abode, this golden core wasn't someone weak in the ancient era. There's a possibility that he may have left behind a perfect spirit weapon. There were different types of ruins in the ancient battlefield. Some of them were cave abodes left behind by ancient cultivators such as the one before them. There were also ruins of sects that would contain a myriad of secret skills and elixir recipes, some of which may have already been extinct. The first goal of all cultivators who entered the ancient battlefield was the Meridian unlocking elixir. For Foundation establishment cultivators, the Meridian unlocking elixir was a treasure that had long been lost in Tianhuang mainland. Each time a Meridian unlocking elixir showed itself, it would lead to a bloody battle. Zimo brought Xueqi and the others to the foot of the mountain where they settled down at an empty space, waiting for the seal to dissipate. He gazed at the cave abode at the top of the mountain in deep thoughts. Little Fatty analyzed, "I don't think there's anything good in a cave abode left behind by a golden core. There's a higher chance of finding a Meridian unlocking elixir in the ruins of a sect." "That's not for sure." Zimo shook his head. Anyone who can dominate the ancient battlefield and leave behind an inheritance cave abode is far from simple. Furthermore, the fact that the seal of this cave abode did not dissipate for so long is proof that there must be great treasures within. As time passed by, the aura of the seal outside the cave abode weakened and the number of cultivators increased. Although everyone was fine now, the tension at the foot of the mountain was getting increasingly heavy. The reason why there was no conflict was because the treasures were not seen yet. It was almost certain that blood would be spilled the moment a rare treasure showed itself. Suddenly, a commotion broke out from the crowd as they dispersed while a group of cultivators with cold expressions wearing dark metal armor strode through. "It's the Great Yu Dynasty. We have to be careful later." Xueqi looked at the dozens of cultivators nearby and whispered, "Their leader should be the prince of the Great Yu Dynasty." Right as Xueqi said that, the Great Yu Prince turned around, seemingly sensing something. When he saw Su Zimo and the rest, there was a flash of mockery in his eyes. That's all the people you have left. Seems like the great Zhou dynasty has suffered quite a heavy loss in just over 10 days. The great Yu prince chuckled. I'll give you guys a suggestion. Stay away from this mess and you might be able to return to Great Zhou alive. Otherwise, foo-foo. Don't worry about it. Ji Yaoshua's tone was calm. The great Yu prince's eyes lit up when he caught sight of Ji Yaoshua's appearance. A strange glint flashed in his eyes as he laughed evilly. How may I address you, beauty? Right after, he looked around and caught sight of Lang Rou and Su Xiaoning, causing the evil glint in his eyes to intensify. Not bad, not bad. The great Yu prince laughed as he rubbed his hands together. You guys come in all shapes and sizes and each has your own merits. I like it, foo-foo. Insolent. Jun Hao bolted upright and shouted with a sullen expression. This is the princess of Great Zhou. How dare you speak such filthy words? Su Zimo frowned. Although Jun Hao seemed like he was chiding the great Yu dynasty, he was exposing Ji Yaoshua's identity at the same time. It was hard to tell if his action was justified. No wonder. The great Yu prince burst into laughter and stared at Ji Yaoshua's flawless face with darkened eyes. His gaze seemed illusory as he said, that's an aura that only a princess can possess. For some reason, Ji Yaoshua felt her head spin when she met with the great Yu prince's gaze. She felt drowsy and was losing her consciousness. All of a sudden, a figure appeared in front of Ji Yaoshua, blocking her from the great Yu prince's gaze. Ji Yaoshua shrugged her head and took a deep breath, regaining clarity in her eyes. There was a hint of regret in the depths of the great Yu prince's eyes. Su Zimo said indifferently, just a word of advice, don't seek trouble for yourself. The great Yu prince frowned as he looked at the scholarly green-robed cultivator standing between the both of them. Narrowing his gaze, he commanded coldly, get lost. Focusing his gaze, the aura around Su Zimo changed all of a sudden. It was as if a strong stench of blood was being exuded from Su Zimo, causing one's heart to palpitate. To the great Yu prince, the frail scholar in his eyes had suddenly turned into a mighty fiend celestial that had emerged from hell, trampling over mountains of corpses and bloodied oceans with a repressive aura. His heart almost popped out of his throat from the shock of meeting Su Zimo's gaze. Clang! Clang! The guards beside the great Yu prince stood forward instinctively, unsheathing the sharp blades around their waist as they glared at Su Zimo nervously and cautiously. Suddenly, the mountain that they were standing on quaked and an ancient aura dissipated, revealing a cave abode on the middle of the mountain. The eyes of many cultivators lit up. The seal had dissipated. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Many cultivators summoned their flying swords and soared into the skies. There were more than 1,000 of them as they sped towards the cave abode in a dense pack. Those who entered the cave abode first naturally had the advantage to obtain the treasures before the others. Su Zimo retracted his gaze and suppressed the killing intent in his heart. He turned to Ji Yaoshua and everyone else, waving his hand. Let's go! The great Yu prince looked hateful as he ordered coldly. Let's fight for the treasure first. We'll deal with this person later. Bang! The cultivators who arrived at the cave abode first struck and shattered the entrance. Amidst the rolling dust, everyone rushed inside. Chapter 352. Quasi-Connate Spirit Weapons. Chapter 352. Quasi-Connate Spirit Weapon. Inside the cave abode, an ancient aura gushed out and the only things that could be seen were 5 dark tunnels leading deep into the unknown. The cultivators who entered the cave abode paused, looking hesitant. All 5 tunnels looked identical and nobody knew which one would lead to a meridian unlocking elixir or other treasures at the end. They could only try their luck. However, if they chose the wrong tunnel, there was a high chance they would return with nothing. They only had one chance. Many cultivators hesitated for a moment before choosing a tunnel to rush inside. The great Yu cultivators entered, marching neatly and disciplined. A single look could tell that they were iron-blooded warriors. Split into 5 teams and enter the different tunnels. Return here immediately if you find nothing. The great Yu prince's voice rang. Understood. The great Yu cultivators replied in unison. Ji Yaoshua and the others instinctively looked at Su Zimo. Unknowingly, He was long regarded as the commander of the expedition by everyone. The safest way would naturally be to split up like the Great Yu Dynasty. That way, the chances of them finding treasures would increase as well. However, there were only 11 of them. Once they separated, their strength would be divided and they could be easily killed given the chaotic situation. A look of determination flashed through Zimo's eyes as he said in a deep voice, "We'll split up. I'll take the second tunnel from the left alone while the 10 of you choose another tunnel." Even if he was alone, Zimo was confident that he could escape unscathed. Among the 10 people of Ji Yaoshue's group, most of them were at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment and Ji Chengtian was at 6. Furthermore, Night Spirit would be with them and they would be able to defend themselves if they met with danger. Su Xiaoning closed her eyes and sensed her surroundings before saying suddenly, "Let's take the 4th tunnel from the right." Along the journey, Su Xiaoning rarely spoke nor gave suggestions. Her sudden decision surprised everyone. Ji Yaoshue pondered for a while before nodding. "We'll listen to Xiaoning. She's the only elixir refinement master among us." She paused for a moment before turning to Zimo with a worried expression. "Be careful too, Zimo. Don't worry. I'll look for you guys as soon as possible." After saying that, he patted Night Spirit on the head and sped towards the 2nd tunnel in a flash. Ji Yaoshue and the others followed suit and rushed towards the 4th tunnel. In the blink of an eye, the hall of the cave abode was empty, leaving only a mess. Even though the cave abode had 5 tunnels, there were even more cultivators who had entered and each tunnel had more than 200 cultivators in them. Condensing his ethereal wings, Zimo sped forward and overtook a group of cultivators before long. Bang! Boom! Bang! There was a loud crash ahead. Zimo looked over and saw that there was a stone chamber at the end of the tunnel. The cultivators who had arrived first were already working together to break the door. However, the stone door was extremely thick and shone with a metallic luster. Even after countless years, it did not corrode and was still indestructible. Against the impact of many spirit arts and weapons, the stone door shook endlessly and dust fell. However, it refused to go down. Splash! Bang! Boom! Boom! Suddenly, the sound of a tsunami wave mixed with rolling thunder could be heard above the heads of the cultivators, echoing in a terrifying manner. Right after, a figure flew past their head and crashed against the stone door heavily. Bang! There was a deafening noise. Under countless frightful gazes, that thick stone door was shattered by that figure and crumbled on the spot into a pile of rubble. Pest! The cultivators gasped. Was that even a human? After smashing the stone door, Zimo entered the chamber without hesitation. It was a spirit weapon chamber. The stone chamber was extremely spacious and there was a crack as thick as an arm on the ceiling. It crossed the entire room and one could see the skies outside that was gradually darkening. There were many spirit weapons in the stone chamber. Most of them were flying swords, but there were also armors, shields and other defensive spirit weapons. They were mostly scattered on aged stone racks. At a glance, there were hundreds of them. When the cultivators rushed in and caught sight of the spirit weapons, their eyes reddened slightly with greed. Snatch! Without any hesitation, the cultivators started fighting for the spirit weapons on the stone racks. 3 superior-grade spirit weapons. Ha ha ha! This is a supreme-grade flying sword. The heavens are on my side. Zimo was calm and unhurried. His eyes were clear and shone with a glint as he swept his gaze across the spirit weapons on the stone rack. To be fair, he did not have much of an interest towards spirit weapons. That was unless they were perfect grade or the legendary Connate spirit weapons. However, the chances of him coming across a Connate spirit weapon in a cave abode at the borders of the ancient battlefield was extremely slim. Zimo was merely looking around to see if there were any perfect spirit weapons. All of a sudden, his gaze landed on a gigantic dark bow. The bow was placed in a corner and looked extremely ordinary and inconspicuous. However, it was almost night outside and the moon was hanging high in the sky. The cool and gentle moonlight shone through the crack on the ceiling and spilled onto the gigantic dark bow. A ray of moonlight slid down the curve of the bow, revealing that there was no dust on it at all. Zimo's eyes lit up. Swash! With a swift motion, he sprinted towards the corner. Lifting the gigantic bow in the blink of an eye, he injected spirit energy into it. Bam! The bow quivered and let out a trembling sound that rattled one's heart. 5 beams of spirit light shone on the gigantic bow. 5 spirit patterns, it was a perfect spirit weapon. Zimo was elated. There were 3 small words etched inside the bow. Moon Concealment Bow. Right after, Zimo's heart stirred as he exclaimed softly. Behind the 3 words was a faint spirit pattern that emitted a soft glow. It was barely discernible against the 5 spirit patterns. This is a Connate spirit pattern. Zimo was shocked. He finally understood the crack on the ceiling of the stone chamber existed. The direction of the crack was aligned to the moon's trajectory. Every night, moonlight would spill onto this gigantic bow, nourishing it. In the ancient battlefield where the spirit chi was so rich, there could only be a single reason why the owner of the cave abode did this. He was trying to make use of the moon essence and the ancient spirit chi to create a Connate spirit weapon. However, it was a pity that the Connate spirit pattern was not fully formed and could only be considered as half-nourished. The moon concealment bow could only be considered as a quasi-Connate spirit weapon. Suddenly, Zimo felt a sense of danger as he sensed scorching gazes piercing his back. The stone chamber seemed to have gone quiet all of a sudden. The 5 spirit lights emanating from the moon concealment bow were completely exposed to the other cultivators, attracting everyone's attention. A perfect spirit weapon. A treasure that even golden cores would bleed for. No one spoke and everyone's breathing became heavier. Chapter 353, Might of Moon Concealment. Chapter 353, Might of Moon Concealment. Kill! Finally, some of the cultivators could not hold back anymore and struck, conjuring hand seals and pointing towards Zimo. Swoosh! A fiery fireball flew over. Clang! Clang! The sound of swords clanging rang as countless spirit lights flashed. In the blink of an eye, the stone chamber was filled with sword chi that were all directed towards a single person. Zimo. The cultivators who struck came from different factions and sections. However, all of them had a tacit understanding at that moment. To them, even a 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator would die without a doubt against such furious attacks. The fiery fireball shot by and the air crackled from the heat. Bang! Suddenly, Zimo extended his palm and trails of lightning wrapped around his arm as he grabbed the incoming fireball. His palm was unharmed. Spirit arts of that level could not threaten Zimo at all. Perhaps, he might have been more concerned if they were cast by a 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. When the cultivators saw that, their pupils constricted. Right after, everyone's vision blurred. Zimo had already vanished from where he was. Bang! 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 A bloody path appeared within the crowd as people were knocked away by a tremendous force, turning into blood mists. Some of them smashed against the stone walls, bleeding from head to toe with broken bones. Some of them were ruptured before they could even react and died on the spot. It was too fast. In the blink of an eye, Zimo had already charged into the crowd. Within a stone chamber as such, Zimo's melee combat strength was thoroughly maximized. A great U cultivator on the left slashed over. Zimo sidestepped and threw out a punch, striking his enemy right in the chest. Snap! The person's chest sank in and a bone-crushing sound could be heard. Flying from the spot, the person's eyes dimmed and he died on the spot. Suddenly, Zimo retreated furiously. Focusing his strength on his back, he leaned backwards with an explosive force. A cultivator behind him was sent flying and exploded into a blood mist in midair. Zimo's footsteps changed continuously and he took another sidestep. Ramming his knees straight, he zigzagged forward and trampled a cultivator into 2. Mountain Reliance, Sanguine Ape Fist Seal and Divine Steed Dismemberment were all killing moves of the mystic classic of the 12 Demon Kings of the Great Wilderness. Anyone who was struck was bound to die. All of those moves were cultivated in life and death situations, nourished through the baptism of blood, and each of them exemplified the maximum prowess of their respective Demon Kings. Zimo tossed and turned in the crowd, and with every step he took, chaos ensued. He barged left and right with a torrential aura and no one was a match for him at all. All of a sudden, Zimo's mind flashed with a warning within that extremely chaotic battlefield. A barely perceptible sound pierced towards the back of his head. Zimo would not have heard it if he had not cleared his ear orifices. Without thinking twice, he released ethereal wings and soared into the air while curling into a ball. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A streak of blue light shot past Zimo's feet, giving off a pungent stench. It was a chain of needles as thick as a cow's hair. Oh, it's poisoned. Zimo narrowed his eyes. If it was any ordinary poison, Zimo would have nothing to fear. His spirit perception did not warn him at all, even when he was tainted with the blood of the Blood Centipede King. However, his spirit perception gave off a warning against this chain of bright blue poison needles. The poison was either so strong that even his bloodline could not endure it, or it had to be very famous. Before Zimo could finish that thought, the poison needles landed in the crowd and struck a few cultivators who did not manage to dodge in time. Their expressions changed and their foreheads turned black instantly. Before they could take a few steps, they turned black from head to toe and collapsed to the ground, dying from the poison. The entire process took less than 3 breaths. What a strong poison! Zimo swept his gaze across the crowd and could not help but frown when he could not find the perpetrator. Mystify! Suddenly, he extended his arm and a ball of lightning condensed in his palm. The ball exploded in front of everyone in a blinding manner. Thunder rumbled and echoed back and forth within that stone chamber, turning increasingly clear and deafening. The thunder art of the Void Thunder Manual could make use of the explosiveness of thunder to blind the 5 senses of a cultivator. Worried about the safety of Ji Yaoxue and the others, Zimo had no intention of getting held back by the cultivators in the stone chamber. Furthermore, there was even a cultivator that was like a viper hidden in the midst. With the help of Mystify, he charged out of the stone chamber in a flash and sped out the tunnel he came from. Chase! He has a perfect spirit weapon. We can't let him run just like that. Many cultivators adapted through Mystify and shouted together, riding on the flying swords as they chased through the tunnel. In the crowd, a skinny man that looked extremely ordinary glared at Zimo's back view. A cold light flashed through his eyes and he followed the others in the pursuit. Within the tunnel, flying swords and spirit arts were shot out continuously. Zimo was extremely annoyed. Suddenly, he recalled the Quasi-Connate spirit weapon he had just obtained and retrieved the moon concealment bow from his storage bag. Arrow, load and strung bow like a full moon. The entire action was done in one go and the 5 spirit patterns on the moon concealment bow shone with a cold and gentle gleam, resembling a full moon. Shoo! 3 arrows shot out in succession, but there was only a single sound streaking through the void. The cultivator at the front of the chase was a 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator. When he saw Zimo load the arrow, he was already prepared and crushed a protection talisman instantly. Poof! There was a crisp sound. The moment the protection talisman was formed, it was pierced by an arrow. That person's head was pierced as well and exploded on the spot. A cultivator behind the person was totally unprepared and was struck by the arrow which still had momentum, falling from midair. Confident of his heavy armor, a great cultivator did not reduce his speed while injecting spirit energy furiously, causing his armor to shine with 3 spirit lights. It was a superior-grade defensive spirit weapon. Poof! An arrow tore through the air and pierced the person's armor instantly. The person's heart-protecting mirror shattered and a bloodied hole appeared in his chest where blood spurted out. Taking a few more steps forward, that person landed heavily on the ground with widened eyes, unable to die in peace. Zimo was secretly shocked at the sight. The might of the moon concealment bow was astonishing and it could even destroy the defense of a superior-grade spirit weapon with ease. Its killing potential was even greater than Blood Quencher. There was no wonder why it was a Quasi-Connate spirit weapon. With 3 arrows, 5 cultivators, including a 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator, were already killed. The cultivators who were hot on Zimo's tail slowed down immediately as no one wanted to run in front. If the green-robed cultivator ahead were to turn back and fire a couple more arrows in this narrow tunnel, they were bound to die as they were all squeezed with nowhere to hide. With that delay, Zimo had already run further and further. Returning to the hall of the cave abode, Zimo looked around but he did not find Ji Yaoxue and the others. Instead, he saw quite a number of cultivators coming forth from the other tunnels, heading into the fourth tunnel from the left. That was the tunnel that Xueqi and the others had chosen. I heard it's an elixir chamber at this side and there's a meridian unlocking elixir. Hurry! We'll miss it if we're too late. When he heard those comments, Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Roar! Suddenly, a terrifying roar echoed from the depths of that tunnel, chilling as though it was a god of war from hell. Night Spirit! Zimo narrowed his gaze. Without hesitation, he sprinted towards the fourth tunnel in a flash. Chapter 354. Let's see who dares to move. Chapter 354. Let's see who dares to move. Cultivators rushed into the fourth tunnel continuously, all of their eyes red with excitement. The meridian unlocking elixir was only effective when consumed for the first time. Even in the ancient era, it was an extremely rare item that was difficult to refine and was offered by super sects to their legacy disciples as rewards. They found meridian unlocking elixirs in there. I heard that there's 3. That's too little. There's nothing we can do about it. Unless it's the ruins of a great sect, there's no way there would be so many meridian unlocking elixirs. It's already extremely lucky to find 3 meridian unlocking elixirs in this cave abode left behind by a golden core. There were hundreds of cultivators gathered outside the elixir chamber and their numbers were rising. Xueqi, the great Zhou dynasty won't be able to hold on to the 3 meridian unlocking elixirs. I advise all of you to know what's good for you. The great Yu prince's voice sounded. That's right. Hand the meridian unlocking elixirs over. Some cultivators shouted. In the depths of the elixir chamber, Xueqi and the others were huddled in a defensive formation. They looked grim and there were corpses around them. Buzz! The wings behind Xuantian flapped and his supreme-grade flying sword circled around him, shining with 4 bedazzling spirit lights as it hummed. He surveyed the surroundings and said in a deep voice, "You'll have to ask my sword if you want the elixirs." Even though he said that, Xuantian was nervous internally and his palms were sweating. The situation was extremely unfavorable for them. The 3 meridian unlocking elixirs instantly turned Xueqi and everyone else into public enemies. If not for Xuantian and Night Spirit's consecutive attacks that cleanly killed off some of the cultivators that attacked them, they might have already been drowned in the chaos. Foo. The great Yu prince chuckled. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to act tough. There's hundreds of us here. You guys will die soon enough with just a single sword strike from each of us. But none of you will be able to escape unscathed as well. Even though Xueqi was a woman, there was a sharp and murderous look on her face, showing her resolve. There was no way anyone would hand over the meridian unlocking elixirs that they have obtained. The reason why the other cultivators had not attacked was because they were wary of Xuantian, who was in midair, and Night Spirit on the ground. However, as time passed by, the cultivators gathered outside increased and the patience of the cultivators here was running out. All of them looked menacing and conjured hand seals while summoning their flying swords. They could strike at any moment. The great Yu prince swept his gaze past Xueqi, Lang Rou and Su Xiaoning before laughing coldly. 3 beauties, I really can't bear to trample on you guys as such. You had better know your place or I won't be able to protect you as well once the fight breaks out, Fufu. This is a feud between the Great Zhou and Great Yu dynasties. Some cultivators, I'm advising you not to be used as a weapon. Xueqi ignored the Great Yu prince and looked at the other cultivators, trying to make some of them back off. The Great Yu prince snorted coldly with a vicious glint in his eyes before declaring loudly, "Everyone, blood must be spilled if you want the elixirs. Meridian unlocking elixirs are getting rarer these days. Right now there's 3 of them here. May they end up in the hands of the strongest ones." With that said, he waved his arm and shouted coldly, "Kill!" Boom! That command lit up the flames of war as a roar erupted from the crowd. Hundreds of cultivators conjured hand seals and pointed their fingers towards Xueqi and the rest. The spirit arts rained down like a torrential rain, sweeping over in an encompassing blanket of light. The spirit chi within the elixir chamber surged instantly, almost turning corporeal. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Sword chi tore through the air and came one after another. Hundreds and thousands of sword lights flashed, beaming forth with an endless brightness as the temperature within the elixir chamber dipped all of a sudden. These were absolutely devastating attacks. At that moment, even Xuantian, who was at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment, looked somewhat pale. The situation before him was much more treacherous than when they were surrounded by the Great Xia and Great Shang dynasties 10 days ago. Xueqi and the others hurried and crushed their protection talismans. Leng Ro poured out all the defensive talismans from her storage bag and cast them out at one go. Dozens of talismans formed layers of barriers around them. This was the strength of a talisman master. While they were not considered strong in head-on combats, if they had sufficient talismans, they could kill foes of even higher cultivation realms by overwhelming them with offensive and defensive talismans. Bang! 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 The spirit arts slammed against the talisman barriers and let out a huge boom. With hundreds of cultivators attacking at the same time, the amount of burst power was too much and Leng Ro's talisman barriers disintegrated one after another. Dozens of Great Yu cultivators clad in heavy armor rushed towards Xueqi's group, wielding steel sabers. In the crowd, some body-tempered cultivators were rapidly approaching as well. All of a sudden, a shadow darted by, dashing towards the incoming Great Yu cultivators like a ghost in the night. It was Night Spirit. 10 sharp claws extended silently, shimmering with a cold glint as they reached out for the throats of 2 cultivators. With a thud, their throats were mangled and filled with blood. They fell dead on the spot. Night Spirit's whip-like tail waved around the crowd, ripping apart the bodies of a few cultivators, and the sharp spike on its tip only stopped after it penetrated the heads of 2 cultivators. Roar! Lowering its head, Night Spirit opened its bloodied mouth and let out a deafening roar. It revealed its ferocious fangs and looked like it was ready to pounce. The entire elixir chamber shook as dust drifted down. Oh! Many cultivators cried out in pain as they stopped to cover their ears subconsciously. Some of the cultivators laid out protection talisman barriers beforehand, but everything shattered from the sound. A row of cultivators standing closest to Night Spirit had their eyes bulge out with veins as fresh blood seeped from their eyes, ears, nose and mouth. They were bleeding from all orifices. The light in the eyes of those cultivators dimmed as they collapsed limply on the floor. They were shocked to death by Night Spirit's voice. Many cultivators were shocked when they saw this. Right after, Night Spirit returned to Su Xiaoning's side and surveyed its surroundings coldly, guarding her carefully. Buzz! An imperceptible ripple appeared in the void, as though it was the surface of a shimmering lake, and pierced into the crowd. Ethereal sword, void level. Poof! A cultivator's head was pierced and he died on the spot. Xueqi, Little Fatty and the others struck as well. In the blink of an eye, the Great Yu dynasty lost dozens of cultivators and a look of hatred flashed through the prince's eyes. However, he gathered his spirits and yelled, "Everyone, hold steady. There's only 10 of them. There's no need for us to fear that demon beast if we work together." In that exchange of blows, Leng Ro's dozens of talisman barriers were already disintegrated. Although Xueqi and the rest were fine and they managed to get some counter-kills with the help of Night Spirit, the number of opposing cultivators was increasing. As long as their enemies worked together, they were bound to be severely injured or dead. Against such intense attacks, even Night Spirit might not be able to protect Su Xiaoning completely. "Kill them!" The Great Yu Prince raised his hand and hollered. "Let's see who dares to move." Suddenly, a frosty voice sounded from behind the crowd. Immediately after, the sound of clothes fluttering through the air at an extremely fast speed arrived as a chilling aura that rattled one's heart accompanied it. Chapter 355, Shocked Crowd. Chapter 355, Shocked Crowd. In a chaotic battlefield with hundreds of cultivators, no one would stop just because someone asked them to. Within the crowd, there were still some cultivators who summoned their flying swords and conjured hand seals. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A loud sound tore through the void at an extremely fast speed and a few cold lights flashed. The arrows arrived before the person did. Poof, poof, poof. With a few crisp sounds, blood flashed. The few cultivators had just conjured their spirit arts and summoned their flying swords. However, their heads were pierced and they died on the spot before they could even make their moves. "Who's there?" The crowd exploded and a series of shouts rang out. Swoosh! A green shadow darted over as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, he crossed everyone's head and charged into the elixir chamber, descending slowly in front of Ji Yaoxue and the rest. You again! The great Yu Prince's face darkened when he caught sight of Su Zimo. However, he gloated internally the next moment. In this situation, anyone who came would die. The great Yu Prince refused to believe that this frail-looking green-robed cultivator could salvage this situation. They had hundreds and thousands of Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. Even a 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator might not be able to escape unscathed. Su Zimo swept his gaze and was only relieved when he saw that Ji Yaoxue and the rest were not injured. Zimo, watch out! There are at least a dozen or so 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators on the other side. Ji Yaoxue whispered to remind him. Right then, the cultivators pursuing from the spirit weapon chamber had caught up as well, glaring at Su Zimo with caution and indignance. Among them, a great Yu cultivator pointed at Su Zimo while panting. Your Highness, that person took away a perfect spirit weapon from the spirit weapon chamber. It's that bow in his hands. A perfect spirit weapon. Upon hearing those words, the eyes of many cultivators lit up and countless gazes locked onto the long bow in Su Zimo's hands greedily. Good, good. 3 Meridian unlocking elixirs and a perfect spirit weapon. The great Yu Prince clapped and smiled. His smile turned increasingly sinister and his voice was chillingly cold. Let's see how many lives the great Zhou dynasty has to spare. What a coincidence. Su Zimo smiled indifferently. I would like to see how many lives you guys can take as well. Right after he said that, Su Zimo's eyes shone with a cold glint. Unknowingly, a long arrow had appeared in his palm and was loaded on the bowstring. The moon concealment bow shone brightly. Swoosh! Tearing through the air, the long arrow stabbed towards the great Yu Prince's head with an instant cold light. Not good. Be careful, Your Highness. No one had expected that Su Zimo would take the initiative so fearlessly in the face of hundreds of menacing Foundation establishment cultivators. How daring did he have to be? What was even more frightening was that the arrow was too fast and powerful that it could not be dodged at all. Blood drained from the great Yu Prince's face. A great Yu guard leaped in front of the great Yu Prince, whipping out a gigantic steel shield that landed on the ground with a boom. Clang! A circular hole appeared on the surface of the steel. The arrow pierced the shield and the person's head, slamming heavily into the great Yu Prince's chest before stopping and falling to the ground. Snap! A series of cracks rippled through the heart-protecting mirror at the great Yu Prince's chest as well. Swoosh! Before the great Yu Prince could react, another chilling sound shot out, as though the air was being torn apart. A second arrow. Clang! 2 great Yu guards were the first to react as they pulled out their sabers and defended against the arrow. Clang! Clang! The sound of metal clashing could be heard as sparks flew. The 2 great Yu guards shuddered and their palms cracked. Yelling in pain, their sabers flew from their hands. Swoosh! The arrow pierced the great Yu Prince's chest once more. Even though most of its power was reduced because of the 2 guards, the heart-protecting mirror at his chest was still shattered. Swoosh! Once again, the sound of an arrow tearing through air reverberated without giving the great Yu Prince a chance to breathe. While the 2 consecutive arrows did not manage to injure the great Yu Prince, he was already scared out of his wits. At that moment, the great Yu Prince had just summoned his flying sword and was about to soar into the air to escape. Suddenly, a cold light appeared before his eyes, growing larger by the moment. The great Yu Prince sensed a hint of death. Right in front of everyone, he had just leaped up when the cold light pierced through his chest. It came out from his back and was embedded heavily on the stone wall nearby. Droplets of blood dripped from the quivering tip of the arrow. The eyes of the great Yu Prince dimmed and he was already dead by the time he fell to the ground. That arrow had not only pierced the great Yu Prince's body, its powerful impact had even ruptured his organs and stole away every single bit of life in him. A 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator was dead within 3 arrows. Bastard, how dare you! Another great Yu cultivator spun around with reddened eyes, wanting to charge forward with all his might. However, Su Zimo said nothing and had already loaded another arrow. With a swoosh, The man fell to the ground as the arrow pierced his body, as well as 2 great Yu cultivators behind him. Another 3 men were dead.
You!
Another great Yu cultivator had just spoken. Raising his head, Zimo fired another arrow. That person was prepared and crushed a protection talisman instantly.
Poof!
The barrier formed by the protection talisman dispersed and the person fell to the ground with a hole on his face. He was dead on the spot. In the blink of an eye, almost all the great Yu cultivators were killed by a few arrows from Zimo. Standing at the front, Zimo wielded the moon concealment bow with his left hand and scanned his surroundings. His gaze burned furiously as he commented indifferently, "I'll take the life of anyone who moves."
Pest!
All the cultivators gasped and their gazes flickered as their impression of Zimo changed slowly. Everyone thought that the green-robed cultivator seemed extremely frail and weak. However, he was merely standing among the crowd with a gigantic bow right now, and yet, hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators did not dare to move recklessly at all. "I'll take the life of anyone who moves." His tone was calm, but it was unquestionable. The cultivators understood that if they attacked at the same time, the green-robed cultivator wouldn't be able to kill everyone no matter how accurate his arrows were and how strong he was. That man would definitely die. However, everyone also realized that the green-robed cultivator possessed the strength to kill each and every one of them. Even 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators might not be able to escape unscathed. No one dared to make the first move. Hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators were shocked and none of them dared move against a single man and his bow. Right then, a cultivator yelled, "That person has another perfect spirit weapon in his possession. It's a blood-colored saber." "That's right. We saw it with our own eyes." Someone else replied. 2 perfect spirit weapons. The crowd was in an uproar. Zimo turned his gaze to those who spoke and understood instantly. They were cultivators of the Great Shang and Great Xia dynasties. 10 days ago, the 2 dynasties were defeated. These were the cultivators who had managed to escape, and they were here as well, separated and hidden among the crowd. "Fellow Taoists, there's a few hundred of us here. How strong can that bow in his hands be?" "That's right. We don't have to be frightened by him. I heard that he's the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou, and there are many supreme-grade spirit weapons in his storage bag. If we kill him, everything will belong to us." Upon hearing those words, the cultivators who were initially hesitant and wanted to retreat were once again filled with murderous intent. The crowd turned restless. Chapter 356. Are you looking for me? Chapter 356. Are you looking for me? 2 perfect spirit weapons, 3 Meridian unlocking elixirs and many more supreme-grade spirit weapons were more than enough for the cultivators to lose their minds. If we take action, there will definitely be cultivators who will perish under his bow. As long as it's not me, I'll have a chance to obtain the perfect spirit weapon and the Meridian unlocking elixirs. That bow can load up to 10 arrows at most, while we have hundreds and thousands of cultivators. How many can he kill? The cultivators were all tempted and harbored designs. A skinny cultivator was hidden in the darkness, glaring at Zimo with a venomous gaze. A blue glint shimmered between his fingers. A murderous intent started spreading through the stone chamber. "Kill!" In the crowd, someone shouted and ignited the flames of war. Zimo shot out an arrow in the direction of the voice without even taking a look, killing a Great Xia cultivator that was hidden in the crowd instantly. Many flying swords tore through the void with sharp intents, and spirit chi surged within the stone chamber as spirit arts burst forth. Zimo did not retreat nor dodge. His eyes lit up as he slapped his storage bag and 18 flying swords appeared instantly. The swords quivered and shone with spirit lights before speeding off, leaving sword scars in the void as a formation light was triggered. Right after, the 18 flying swords gathered together with their tips pointing outwards in unison, forming a gigantic sword-shaped circular disc. 18 rays of sword chi were released like a blazing sun and was extremely dazzling. It was the candlelight sword formation. Clang, clang, clang. The sounds of metal clashing rang as many superior-grade flying swords collided against the candlelight sword formation and were repelled. They stabbed into the stone chamber's walls and quivered endlessly. That person's a sword formation master. 18 supreme grade flying swords. There must be even more treasures in his storage bag. What a strong sword formation. The cultivators yelled non-stop.
Go!
Zimo pointed forward and a gigantic sword-shaped blazing sun crushed towards the crowd. The swords glowed coldly and shadows flew all over the place, accompanied by a striking blood mist. The massacre had begun. When he was at 3 Foundation Establishment, Zimo's candlelight sword formation could already kill 5 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivators. Now that he had unlocked his 4th Spirit Meridian, his spirit energy was even richer and the might of the candlelight sword formation was even stronger. Although the cultivators before him were the geniuses from various sects and factions within Tianhuang mainland, none of them could withstand the might of candlelight.
Oh!
Tragic cries sounded from the crowd. Clang! At the same time, Zimo put away his moon concealment bow and retrieved a gigantic blood-colored saber from his storage back, slashing in reverse.
Clang! Clang!
Clang! The incoming flying swords were shattered by Blood Quencher on the spot, scattering to the ground. Supreme-grade spirit weapons were the only items able to defend against Blood Quencher's sharpness right now. Splash!
Bang! Boom! Boom!
Zimo channeled his bloodline and his body let out the terrifying sound of tsunami gushing mixed with thunder rumbling and the sinister sound of tigers and leopards. Gripping Blood Quencher with one hand, he pointed to the group of cultivators and yelled, "This is the perfect spirit weapon, Blood Quencher. Let's see who can take it alive." Many cultivators were completely stunned by Zimo's methods and fell silent. Attack! At the same time, Xueqi commanded. Everyone from Ethereal Peak attacked in succession, assisting Zimo. Boom! Zimo entered the stance of Plow Heaven's stride and took a step forward. Stamping on the ground with one foot, an echo shook the entire elixir chamber as though it could collapse at any moment. Many cultivators lost their footing and almost fell to the ground. Bursting into laughter, Zimo had already charged into the crowd wielding Blood Quencher with immense momentum. The blade swung and cleaved left and right. No one could survive a single exchange against Zimo. Blood Quencher was mighty to begin with. Even body-tempered cultivators such as Little Fatty and Xuantian would not be able to lift Blood Quencher given its weight. Coupled with Zimo's strong physique and terrifying bloodline, Blood Quencher was practically a weapon of mass destruction with frightening killing potential when it was swung in the crowd. Let's see where you guys can run to. Zimo barged into the crowd and focused his attention on the cultivators of Great Shang and Great Xia. No matter who was in front of him, they would be sent flying with a single strike. Anyone touched by Blood Quencher would be severely injured, if not dead. The survivors of the Great Shang and Great Xia dynasties were initially well hidden within the crowd. However, Zimo located them in the blink of an eye and killed them on the spot. Many cultivators were utterly defeated as broken limbs flew everywhere on the battlefield while fresh blood gushed out. The stone chamber was almost entirely dyed red. Even 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivators were helpless against Zimo. This was a one-sided defeat. At that moment, many cultivators were gradually realizing that only a 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator, or the successor of one of Tianhuang mainland's strongest factions, could take on someone like Zimo. Everyone pushed, shoved and shouted as they scurried towards the tunnel they came from. However, the entrance of the stone chamber was only so big and there was a limit to the number of cultivators the tunnel could hold. As such, the thousands of cultivators squeezed together in a chaotic manner. All of a sudden, a sense of danger rang in Zimo's mind. It's him again. He narrowed his gaze and instantly, a murderous intent rose in his heart. In a flash, Zimo lowered his body and was almost stuck to the ground. He slithered into the crowd like a snake and disappeared. A blue light shot by the spot where Zimo disappeared from, flitting into the crowd. After 2 breaths, the faces of more than 10 cultivators in the crowd turned black as they fell to the ground silently, dead. In such a chaotic battlefield, it was no big deal for those few cultivators to die. Before long, their figures were drowned by more cultivators rushing from the back and no one paid attention to them. In a corner, a skinny man hid amongst the crowd. While he looked like he was escaping, his gaze was actually fixed in the crowd, seemingly looking for something. Is he already dead? The skinny man mumbled softly with a confused expression. The crowd had blocked his line of view for a brief moment earlier on, and he seemed to have caught sight of the green-robed cultivator falling after he attacked. Logically, that man should have been dead after being struck by his soul-seeking needle. However, the skinny man searched continuously, but could not find any traces of the green-robed cultivator's corpse. Could his body have been shifted because of the crowd? Frowning tightly, the skinny man felt that there was something amiss. Not far away, a green-robed figure was sprawled on the ground within the chaotic crowd, slithering and approaching at an extremely fast speed using all four limbs. As the skinny man frowned in his thoughts, his vision blurred and a green figure stood up from the ground right in front of him, blocking his line of sight. "Are you looking for me?" An ice-cold voice rang beside the skinny man's ears, carrying a chilling, killing intent that caused his heart to sink. Chapter 357, Poison Sect. Chapter 357, Poison Sect. A look of panic flickered through the skinny man's eyes. However, he returned to normal in an instant and spirit energy surged furiously within him as he raised his palm, revealing 6 spirit meridians that shone beneath his robes. A blood-red powder was thrown out, spreading instantly with a refreshing fragrance. Zimo felt his head spin and his heart skipped a beat. He activated his bloodline which churned rapidly inside him and the spinning sensation disappeared immediately. At the same time, a warning flashed in his mind. Squatting down, he curled into a ball right away. The moment Zimo squatted down, a cold light flashed above his head. He saw everything clearly. It was a long pitch-black steel needle that was hidden within the blood-red powder and was completely undetectable. In reality, the blood-red powder was extremely toxic by itself and most cultivators would not have been able to survive it. No matter how strong and terrifying their physiques and bloodlines were, their heads would spin and they would lose their consciousness soon after breathing it in. During that period of time, the steel needle that was hidden in the powder would be more than enough to pierce the head of the other party. That was the skinny man's killing move. In fact, he had already predicted that the blood-red powder would not have been able to hurt Zimo. However, he did not expect Zimo to snap out of it so quickly and squat down the moment he was sober to evade the killing move. That single exchange of blows was already filled with peril within. Right after squatting down, Zimo moved in and killing intent shone in his eyes. He was in a pseudo-knelt stance with his arms propped up, as though he was making a fruit offering. The moment he evaded the skinny man's killing move, Zimo executed a killing move of his own. The skinny man's expression was unchanged as he leaped backwards while sending his heel forth to kick against Zimo's hands. Zimo frowned internally. Usually, he would definitely be fearless if his opponent chose to meet him head-on. Given his physique, he had absolute confidence of smashing the skinny man's feet with a single punch. However, for some unknown reason, Zimo felt uneasy the moment the skinny man kicked out. Swoosh! Ethereal wings spread out behind Zimo and he soared into the air before the move was completely unleashed. All of a sudden, a faint green blade poked out from the man's heel, emitting a pungent smell with poison tainting its tip. While Zimo could have destroyed the skinny man's soul with a single punch earlier on, he would have to be damaged by the poison blade in return. Zimo realized that the man was filled with poison from head to toe and must not be touched. Clang! Hovering in midair, Zimo retrieved Blood Quencher from his storage bag. Descending from the skies like a god, he hollered with a torrential killing intent, "Die!" Swash! Blood Quencher slashed through the air and its massive blood beam seemed to cut the entire elixir chamber in half. The skinny man was shocked as his vision was shrouded by the blood beam and he could barely see anything else. Slapping on his storage bag, the skinny man hurriedly retrieved a steel shield and injected spirit energy into it, causing it to expand above his head. Boom! The moment the shield was summoned, the blood beam arrived and collided against its surface heavily with a resounding bang. The shield shattered. With a thud, a shield shard stabbed into the skinny man's abdomen, almost penetrating through as blood gushed out. The skinny man staggered a few steps backwards before falling to the ground, his face pale as he watched Zimo who was approaching. A bitter look flashed through his eyes as he laughed sinisterly. "You can't kill me. I'm from the Poison Sect." Poison Sect. Zimo arrived in front of the skinny man and looked down with a cold expression. Sensing no reaction from Zimo, the skinny man laughed in a mocking manner. From your reaction, I suppose you haven't heard of the poison sect. Zimo replied indifferently, you're right, I haven't indeed. However, I'd like to.
Heh.
Laughing sinisterly, the skinny man said, the poison sect is one of the 5 heretical doctrines. You won't be able to deal with the consequences of offending us. Let me remind you that I'm merely the weakest disciple of the poison sect. Otherwise, there's no reason why I would be roaming around the borders of the ancient battlefield. Demonist Ji had once told Zimo that there were 9 top factions in Tianhuang mainland and Immortal. Buddhist and Fiend sects were merely a part of them. Among the 9 factions, there were the unorthodox groups. The 9 immortal sects, 8 demon races, 7 fiend sects, 6 Buddhist monasteries. Right after them were the 5 heretical doctrines. In other words, the Poison Clan was one of the top sects in Tianhuang mainland. Typically, legacy disciples of these 9 great factions would not be found at the borders of the ancient battlefield. However, what the skinny man had said should be true. Even though his cultivation realm was not high, his methods were sinister and he was filled with poison. Zimo could die on the spot if he was careless given his current strength. 5 heretical doctrines, so what? Zimo asked differently. The skinny man's expression changed. He could sense killing intent from Zimo's calm voice. I'll kill someone even if they're from the immortal sects. Zimo laughed coldly and swung his saber. The skinny man let out a miserable howl. If you kill me, all of you will have to die on the ancient battlefield. The moment he said that, the skinny man's head was lopped into the air with blood gushing out. In that short while, the elixir chamber was left with nothing but corpses on the ground and the pathetic back views of all the other cultivators who had escaped. Although Ji Yaoxue and the rest had expended a lot of energy for another intense battle, they could not conceal the excitement in their eyes. The rewards of this battle were too great. Notwithstanding the hundreds of storage bags, they had even retained the 3 meridian unlocking elixirs. Ji Yaoxue handed a jade bottle to Zimo with a smile. Zimo, there are 3 meridian unlocking elixirs inside. Take one of them. Since Xiaoning was the one who discovered their existence initially, it's only right that she gets one. As for the last one, we'll give it to fellow Taoist Ji Xuantian. I'm sure no one has any objections towards the distribution. Zimo received the jade bottle and opened it to take a look. A bitter herbal fragrance wafted out, causing the spirit energy in his meridians to rumble. The 3 meridian unlocking elixirs were not of high grades. 1 inferior and 2 middle grades. Pushing the jade bottle back, Zimo said, put it away first. We'll talk about this later. First, let's tidy up our gains and leave this place. All right. Ji Yaoxue nodded. Before long, everyone tidied everything and left the elixir chamber with Zimo, returning to the hall of the cave abode. Zimo looked at the 5 tunnels and pondered. If those 2 tunnels led to the spirit weapon and elixir chambers, the other 3 should lead to spirit arts, talismans and secret array formation manuals. That's right, that should be the case. Ji Xuantian nodded in agreement. Ji Yaoxue frowned slightly. If that's the case, the other treasures should have been swept cleanly with so many cultivators rushing in at the start. There should be nothing left. Let's take a look. Zimo said and led the way. As he had expected, the other 3 tunnels led to spirit art, talisman and array formation chambers. The spirit art and talisman chambers were swiped cleanly by the many cultivators. However, it was very likely that the formation chamber was still intact. After all, there was an ancient formation set up at its entrance that had no signs of being dispelled. Chapter 358. Decision. Chapter 358. Decision. The formation in front of the stone chamber was initially complex and obscure. However, after all these years, it was now on the verge of collapsing. Zimo observed it for a moment and started to dispel the formation. By dawn, the ancient formation was finally dispelled as everyone cheered and followed Zimo inside. This stone chamber was much more spacious than the previous ones. Inside was a stone bed with a dried corpse sitting on it. The moment everyone entered the chamber, The movement of the air currents caused the corpse to turn into ash and scatter. Even golden cores could not withstand the corrosion of time, and there were no traces left. The stone chamber did not resemble a formation chamber, but the cultivation chamber of the golden core instead. There were a few racks on both sides of the stone bed with many ancient manuals, jade and secret scrolls as well as jade bottles with elixirs in them. Zimo casually went forward and flipped through them. There were all sorts of items in the chamber, including talisman and elixir recipes as well as secret formation manuals. Meridian Unlocking Elixir. Suddenly, Xuantian's voice sounded with delight and excitement. Everyone turned over and saw her clutching a jade bottle tightly, her voice somewhat emotional. There's more Meridian Unlocking Elixirs inside. Ah, how many are there? Little Fatty and the rest asked hurriedly. Pausing for a moment, Xuantian said slowly, 13. Haha, that's great. Si Yutong could not help but burst into laughter. If there were only 3 Meridian Unlocking Elixirs, he would not have been in line for one of them. Now that there were 13, he would get one no matter what. Junhao remained calm and lowered his head slightly with a cold glint in his eyes. Xuantian continued, furthermore, the Meridian Unlocking Elixirs in this jade bottle are of higher grades. 5 of them are superior grade and the rest are all middle grade. The other cultivators exchanged glances and smiled. This was a pleasant surprise. Including the 3 Meridian Unlocking Elixirs previously, they had a total of 16 and would have excess even after distributing to everyone. This meant that everyone could choose to cultivate in seclusion without taking the risk to look for treasures outside, and just wait to return to the Great Zhou Dynasty a year later. In the ancient battlefield, the longer one spent outside, the easier it would be for them to meet with danger. They did not merely have to defend against the threat of birds, beasts and ancient living beings, but also other sects and factions. Yet, all of those were gone for them right now. Zimo smiled faintly, seemingly distracted. Ji Yaoxue frowned slightly in deep thought when she saw Zimo smile. The timing for one to consume a Meridian Unlocking Elixir was rather particular. Typically, most cultivators would make use of the rich spirit qi of the ancient battlefield to cultivate, and only consume the Meridian Unlocking Elixir after they unlocked their 6th spirit meridian so as to attempt for the 7th. In their group, Ji Xuantian was the only 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator right now. However, Ji Xuantian held onto the Meridian Unlocking Elixir in his hands and contemplated for a long time. Instead of using it, he put it away. Zimo nodded in silent agreement when he saw that. It was clear that Ji Xuantian wanted to attempt to unlock the 7th spirit meridian with his own strength and leave the Meridian Unlocking Elixir to try and attempt for the 8th meridian. Naturally, there was no way Zimo was going to consume it as well. In part, it was because his cultivation realm was too low. It would be a waste of such a treasure if he were to consume it at 4 Meridian Foundation Establishment. At the same time, it was because the grade of the Meridian Unlocking Elixir was too low. Ever since he started cultivating, Zimo had rarely consumed elixirs and they were all at perfect grade. Before entering the ancient battlefield, Zimo had already made up his mind that not only would he have to look for a Meridian Unlocking Elixir, he had to look for one at perfect grade. The reason why Foundation Establishment had its name was because it was the process of stabilizing the root of one's cultivation path. The finer the Foundation Establishment, the slimmer the chances of one encountering issues in the future of their cultivation. Zimo was an immortality and demonic cultivator to begin with and his path was fraught with difficulties. He was not going to allow any blemishes to appear on it. The group had not slept for an entire day. Coupled with the fact that they had just experienced another intense battle, they were finally feeling the fatigue now that things had calmed down. Without a word, little Fatty looked for a corner to sleep. Jian scratched his head and looked for a corner to rest as well. Take a rest first if you're tired. Zimo nodded and turned to leave. Looking at Zimo's back view, Ji Yaoxue pondered for a moment before following along. He left the cave abode and surveyed his surroundings before soaring into the air, only returning after circling the surroundings. Ji Yaoxue stood by the entrance of the cave abode and looked at Zimo who had just returned. "What are you doing, Zimo?" Ji Yaoxue asked. Zimo smiled. "I took a look around and saw that this cave abode is located halfway up the mountain and the slope is rather steep. As such, it's easy to defend and hard for anyone to attack us. There's even scars of formation patterns left behind which I can repair. This is an excellent place for cultivation in seclusion, and you guys can stay here in peace. Suddenly, Ji Yaoxue asked, Zimo, where are you going? Zimo froze for a moment. He had not expected Ji Yaoxue to notice something amiss with his casual remark. She did not say anything, merely looking at Zimo silently with a slightly lowered head. After pondering for a moment, Zimo gave a bitter smile. I want to check out the depths of the ancient battlefield. We've got sufficient meridian unlocking elixirs and can stay here to cultivate before returning to Great Zhou a year later. It's too dangerous to head into the depths of the ancient battlefield. Ji Yaoxue frowned. Zimo, birds and beasts are not the only ferocious things in the depths of the ancient battlefield. The cultivators there are extremely strong and they can kill people beyond their cultivation realms. Furthermore, there are many top factions and successors of super sections. If you're alone. Although Ji Yaoxue did not continue, deep worry could be seen from her eyes. Zimo faked a relaxed smile. It's fine. If I can't defeat them, I'll be able to escape given my strength. The matter about the meridian unlocking elixirs was not something he could explain simply. Moreover, Zimo could vaguely sense that he would still head into the depths of the ancient battlefield even without the allure of the meridian unlocking elixirs. His nature was not that of a scholar and his bloodline was filled with restlessness, a fearless bravado to continue moving forward. He wanted to check out how the so-called successors and legacy disciples of immortal, Buddhist and top faction sects were like. Rather, Zimo wanted to have a good fight with those people. I'll accompany you then. Ji Yaoxue said, I'll be able to provide you with some help no matter what. No. Decisively, Zimo shook his head and rejected her. Yaoxue, there's no need for you to take the risk and head into the depths of the ancient battlefield with me. Cultivate here and I'll return a year later. Really? Ji Yaoxue pouted slightly in disbelief. Of course. Zimo smiled. When are you leaving? A few days later, after I repair the ancient formations surrounding this cave abode. Pausing for a moment, Zimo retracted his smile and turned around with a stern expression. There's one more thing I have to remind you. There's a spy remaining among us. Ji Yaoxue's expression changed slightly. Who? It might be Junhao. No matter what, Junhao had not done anything bad right from the start and Zimo could not kill him out of mere suspicion. Furthermore, Junhao had a special identity. He was Ji Yaoxue and Xiaoning's senior brother of the same sect. He just had to inform Ji Yaoxue about this so that she could watch out for him. Chapter 359, Xuantian City. Chapter 359, Xuantian City. Not long after Ji Yaoxue left, Night Spirit escorted Xiaoning over as Zimo repaired the array formations around the cave abode. What's wrong? He asked when he saw Xiaoning hesitant to speak, as though something was bothering her. She hesitated for a moment before taking out an ancient elixir furnace and frowned. Brother, for some reason, this elixir furnace has been emitting heat ever since we entered the ancient battlefield. Zimo received the elixir furnace and touched it. Indeed, the elixir furnace was giving off a faint heat that was not too obvious. This was the elixir furnace was the source of their feud with True Fire Sect back in the capital of Great Zhou. Ever since Xiaoning obtained that elixir furnace, she was able to focus with ease and reach her peak performance for elixir refinement. Back then, Zimo had already sensed that this elixir furnace had an extremely powerful background. From the looks of it, there was a high chance that this elixir furnace had something to do with the ancient battlefield. Returning the elixir furnace to Xiaoning, he asked, other than emit heat, is there anything else strange about it? Strange. Xiaoning pondered for a moment before replying, I haven't been sleeping well for the past few days. It feels as though there's something imperceptibly reaching out to me. Does that count? Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he asked, can you sense what direction it's reaching out to you from? That way. Xiaoning pointed to the south with a firm tone. Nodding in reply, Zimo formed a plan. Since he was already planning on checking out the depths of the ancient battlefield, he might as well head along the direction that Xiaoning pointed out to see if he could uncover the secret behind the ancient elixir furnace. For the next 10 odd days, Zimo stayed in the last stone chamber alone for a couple of days after repairing the array formations outside before summoning everyone to the hall of the cave abode. I plan to leave this place and check out the depths of the ancient battlefield. Zimo made a casual glance at Junhao after saying that. The latter's emotions could not be read. Ji Yaoxue and Su Xiaoning knew about this matter beforehand and naturally did not have much of a reaction. However, the others had varying reactions. Si Yutong was the first to leap out and object. I'm definitely not going. Before entering the ancient battlefield, many seniors have advised me countless times not to enter the depths of the ancient battlefield. I'm not going to join your death wish. Mr. M.O., we have the terrain advantage here and the protection of the formations. Now that we've already obtained the meridian unlocking elixirs, we can just cultivate here in seclusion. There's no need for us to take the risk of exploring deep into the ancient battlefield. A great Zhou guard frowned and shook his head as well. Brother Zimo is strong and he's able to protect himself even in the depths of the ancient battlefield. Junhao stood up and sighed regrettably. However, it's a pity that my strength is limited so I can't join you. Su Zimo looked at Junhao silently with a fake smile before turning to the other cultivators. Ji Qingtian said in a deep voice, Zimo, I'll join you.
Bro, me too.
Little Fatty stood out hurriedly. Lang Rou nodded to Su Zimo as well. Shrugging, Jian said with a silly smile, I'll join you guys too. Another great Zhou guard frowned with a stern expression. Everyone, you have to think this through properly. It is much more dangerous in the depths of the ancient battlefield than the borders. Every step will be filled with danger and you'll most likely die. The cultivators there are at least at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment. Another person added, that's right. If you encounter a successor of one of the top factions, they can kill you guys single-handedly. For the past thousands of years, there has never been a cultivator who had entered the depths of the ancient battlefield and returned alive. Su Zimo cupped his fists. Thank you for your reminders, fellow Taoists, but I have already decided. In truth, everyone from Ethereal Peak knew that it was more dangerous deeper into the ancient battlefield. However, danger and opportunity was correlated. Furthermore, there was something more important for Ji Chengtian and the others. Before entering the ancient battlefield, the two peak masters, Lu Hui and Xian Yi, had already hinted to them that they should search for alternative tunnels to leave the Great Zhou Dynasty and the Tianhuang North region. Before long, Ji Qingtian, Lang Rou, Little Fatty, Xiaoning, Jian and Night Spirit arrived behind Su Zimo. The team of 11 people were now left with Ji Yaoxue and 2 great Zhou guards along with Junhao and Si Yutong. I've already repaired the array formations outside and there are sufficient stone chambers. You guys can split up to cultivate. Su Zimo gazed deeply at Ji Yaoxue before leaving with Xiaoning and the rest. After Su Zimo and the others left, Ji Yaoxue said indifferently in a dejected manner, I'll be cultivating in seclusion from today on. Nobody should enter my cultivation chamber. With that said, she walked towards the stone chamber at the end of the 5th tunnel. There were 5 stone chambers in total and Si Yutong chose one of them to begin his long cultivation as well. Junhao gazed at Ji Yaoxue's back view and a cold glint flashed through his eyes as he smirked. After leaving the place, Su Zimo checked against the map and led everyone south. With Su Zimo and Night Spirit around, the journey was still relatively safe. However, as they ventured deeper, even Su Zimo was feeling a gradual sense of pressure. The strength of the ferocious beasts they encountered was getting stronger, and they were even ambushed by some other cultivators a couple of times. Apart from Su Zimo, almost everyone else was injured. Although they were of the same cultivation realm, the 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators they encountered in the depths of the ancient battlefield were much stronger than those at the borders. Even Ji Chengtian was beaten in a one-on-one fight despite possessing Ethereal Peak's 3 major secret skills. As for Su Zimo, the pressure on him was mounting. He could ensure the safety of the 6 of them at the borders of the ancient battlefield. But now, he could only ensure 2 at most. They continued on the road for 10 days with barely any time to cultivate. Even though their cultivation realms were similar to before, Ji Qingtian and the others experienced significant growth in their strength due to the intense battles and brushes with death in those 10 days. That was a transformation that cultivation in seclusion could never achieve. 10 days later, an ancient city appeared on the horizon close to evening, as if an ancient beast was sprawled there. That was a place indicated on the map as a gathering spot, named Xuantian City. Cities that were left behind in the ancient battlefield were usually the biggest gathering spots where cultivators of all factions gathered. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They were worn out physically and mentally after being on the road for 10 days. Apart from Zimo, who was still brimming with energy without any signs of fatigue, the others bore injuries and were already at their limits. If they could not find a place to settle down before the sky turned dark, that would have been an arduous night for them. Along the way, Xuantian and the others gradually viewed Zimo with increasing curiosity and respect. Be it at the borders of the ancient battlefield or deep inside, nobody could read Zimo's limits. That seemingly frail body of his seemed to possess limitless energy, and his vigor and endurance were shocking. The few of them knew that if not for Zimo, they would have died on the journey before they even saw Xuantian City. Chapter 360, Obstruction. Chapter 360. Obstruction. North Gate of Xuantian City. As the sky gradually darkened, there were almost no cultivators crossing the city gates by now. Anyone who dared to leave the city at this time was either fools who didn't know their places or peerless experts who were confident in their cultivation. By the time Zimo and the others arrived at the city gates, 2 cultivators were pushing the tall and thick stone doors shut slowly. "Fellow Taoists, please hold on," Zimo shouted hurriedly. If he wanted to enter the city, Zimo could burst forth with ethereal wings or divine steed fleeting and make it through the gates before it closed. However, Xuantian and the others could not do so. The few of them were physically and mentally exhausted after the battles along the way. There was no way they had energy left given their injuries. The moment Zimo said that, the stone door paused for a moment as the 2 cultivators at the city gates looked towards him with a slight frown. To them, the group of 6 looked worn out. Apart from their leader, the green-robed cultivator, who looked normal, the others were in a wretched state. Furthermore, they could not see Zimo's group wearing sect badges or anything that could reveal their identities. In the ancient battlefield, successors and disciples of the top factions of Tianhuang mainland would naturally not bother to conceal their identities. Many a time, those people could do whatever they want and save themselves trouble just by revealing their identity badges. The 2 cultivators guarding the city gates had seen many people like Zimo's group who did not carry any identification. They were either itinerant cultivators or disciples of some ordinary sect or faction. The 2 of them exchanged glances and smirked before continuing to close the stone doors together, as if they had not heard anything. All of a sudden, the sound of clothes fluttering through the air echoed and the wind howled as though a tsunami was gushing. Arriving in the blink of an eye, the 2 of them turned over instinctively and their pupils constricted. Unknowingly, the green-robed cultivator who was initially far away had already arrived at the city gates, pushing against the stone doors with his arms spread wide. No matter how the 2 of them pushed, the stone door would not budge. The green-robed cultivator seemed to possess infinite strength as he stood like an unshakable spirit, glaring at the 2 of them coldly in front of the city gates.
You!
Gulping, the 2 of them looked on with panic. "Why are you closing the door?" Zimo asked slowly, his voice icy cold. Rejecting them outside the gates before night descended was no different from killing them. In the night, Zimo could only struggle to save himself against countless ferocious beasts and ancient living beings. The rest would definitely die. "What are you doing?" one of them asked sternly. Zimo did not reply and shook his arms. With a loud rumble, the 2 stone doors vibrated violently and dust rustled. Instantly, the 2 cultivators were alarmed and felt their hands go numb, letting go instinctively. They stumbled a few steps backwards and nearly fell to the ground.
"Audacious!"
They yelled and withdrew flying swords from their storage bags. Glaring at Zimo cautiously, they were prepared to strike at any moment. Zimo's expression was unchanged as he clenched his fists. In that time, Xuantian and the others had arrived at the city gates, panting and looking pale. "Zimo, forget it. We're new to Xuantian City and know nothing about this place. Let's not cause trouble. Furthermore, it's fine now that we're already inside the city." During this period of interaction, Xuantian and the others had some understanding of Zimo's personality as well. Xuantian City was a motley place with unknown experts and strong factions hidden within. Xuantian was worried that Zimo would attract big trouble by standing up for them. Zimo nodded and glanced at the two cultivators indifferently. Their hearts skipped a beat. They could sense a violent killing intent through Zimo's gaze. This is someone who can just injure anyone at any moment without hesitation. The same thought fluttered through their minds as they watched Zimo's group leave, not daring to stop them. Xuantian and the others were tense the entire time as well, afraid that something unexpected might happen and cause trouble. They only heaved a sigh of relief after the two cultivators guarding the gates let them pass silently. There were quite a number of cultivators in Xuantian City, and ancient buildings stood on both sides of the streets, most of the residences occupied by many cultivators. Zimo's group attracted the gazes of many cultivators as they walked through the city. There's a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator in that group of 6? How did they manage to get to Xuantian City alive? It's no use even if they're inside the city. I reckon that the 6 of them won't survive for more than 3 days. Xuantian City is no friendly place. Without strong backing, they can only be subjected to being slaughtered by others like fish on a chopping board. As those cultivators discussed, more than 10 cultivators came down from the city walls. Their leader was a tall and burly man whose clothes exposed his hairy chest and carried a fierce gaze. It's already past 7 p.m. and you haven't closed the city gates? Are you too tired of living? The burly cultivator's voice was rough and he spoke like a ruffian. Zimo's group was still nearby. When they heard that voice, Xuantian and the others were stunned and their hearts sank. A cultivator shook his head with pursed lips when he saw this, smiling. 3 days? There's no way the 6 of them can leave now that he has appeared. That's right. The few of them are already at the end of their road given their injuries through their arduous journey. There's no way that man is going to let go of these lambs that are ripe for the slaughter. Who is that man? Someone asked. He's the right-hand man of the 4 mounted bandits, Xuanli. Even though he's only at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment, he is skilled in corporal mortification martial arts and is extremely strong with a vengeful bloodthirst. There's few people who are willing to provoke him at the north gate of Xuantian City. The 4 mounted bandits. Pest. Many cultivators were shocked when they heard that, shutting their mouths and gasping in secret. City gates. The 2 cultivators were so scared that their bodies shivered as they hurriedly pointed towards the back of Zimo's group. It's them. We were about to shut the city gates when the 6 of them barged in. Xuanli turned towards Zimo's group as a violent glint flashed in his eyes. If everyone else could tell that Zimo's group was weak after traveling, it was only natural that Xuanli's burning eyes could tell the same. He recognized their weakness with a single glance. The 6 of you up front, stop right there. Xuanli hollered and charged murderously towards Zimo's group with more than 10 other cultivators. Xuantian and the others sighed internally and could only stop and turn back. Initially, Zimo was walking right at the front. After they turned around, he was already behind them. Zimo was about to advance when Xuantian held him back and whispered, Zimo, don't be reckless. Let's see what this man wants. It'll be best if we don't have to fight. That's right, bro. Judging from the cultivators around us, this guy seems to have a powerful background. Let's try not to fight him head-on, Little Fatty whispered as well with sweat dripping down his forehead. Chapter 361, Violent Killing. Chapter 361, Violent Killing. Xuanli's face was menacing as he held a wine jar in his left hand and a single saber in his right. The blade was snow-white and radiated a cold aura. With more than 10 other cultivators, Xuanli rushed over in a huff. I am Xuantian. Fellow Taoist, how can I help you? Xuantian was extremely polite and took the initiative to greet with cupped fists first, nodding as he smiled. If this was back in Tianhuang mainland, given Xuantian's polite manners and the fact that they did not have any deep-seated hatred or benefits to gain, it would be difficult for a conflict to break out. However, this was the ancient battlefield. They were not faced with kind people. Even if they meant no harm, the other side meant harm. Xuantian. Xuanli raised his brow and asked with a fake smile, What's your cultivation? 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment. Xuantian hesitated slightly, not hiding anything. What about you guys? Xuanli looked towards Zimo and the others before remarking casually. This is the rules of Xuantian City. If you want to enter the city, you'll have to report your cultivation realm without hiding any information. Upon hearing this, the cultivators in Xuantian City bore strange expressions. There was no such rule in the city. The reason why Xuanli said that was most likely because he wanted to find out the strength of Zimo's group. After all, there was no way of telling how many spirit meridians a foundation establishment cultivator unlocked by merely using the spirit peering art. While Xuanli looked like a brute, he was experienced in the world and knew that cultivators who could arrive at Xuantian City were far from simple. He was worried that he might accidentally get into trouble. Zimo frowned at the rules mentioned by Xuanli. Even though Little Fatty and the others were against it, they still confessed honestly. 4. 5 Meridian Foundation Establishment. And there was even someone at late-stage Foundation Establishment. After Zimo, the last person to speak, was done, the surrounding cultivators shook their heads in silence. Venturing into the depths of the ancient battlefield with that level of strength? They truly have a death wish. That's right. There are few cultivators who are even at 5 Meridian Foundation Establishment in Xuantian City. Any casual person could wipe their entire group out. Xuanli was also completely at ease. Drinking a mouthful of strong liquor, he looked intoxicated as he burped with his alcohol-like breath onto Xuantian's face. Even though Xuantian looked rather terrible, he let out a long breath and endured it. Snickering, Xuanli asked, "It's been a month since we've entered the ancient battlefield. Have you guys obtained any meridian unlocking elixirs?" Xuantian shook his head without hesitation. No. In reality, each of them had a meridian unlocking elixir in their storage bags. However, they would definitely get themselves killed if they were to admit to it now. Very good. Xuanli nodded and said expressionlessly, "Hand over your storage bags. I'm going to check through it personally." The moment he said that, not only Xuantian, even Little Fatty and the others were enraged. He was blatantly bullying them. Zimo remained silent as he stood behind Xuantian and watched on coldly. Xuantian took a deep breath of air and said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist, isn't that request a little overboard?" Overboard. Before Xuantian could finish, Xuanli narrowed his gaze and asked with a smile. Xuanli's eyes shone with a cold glint before he finished his remark. The saber in his hand slashed towards Xuantian's neck at an extremely fast speed with a chilling aura. That slash was completely without warning and filled with killing intent. Xuantian had grown a lot after the month of training, and his awareness had increased greatly as well. Earlier on, he could vaguely sense Xuanli's killing intent. However, he was thoroughly worn out because of their long journey. As such, he wasn't in good condition and his reaction was a little slower. The sharpness of the blade arrived and Xuantian could imagine his throat being sliced as his skin felt a slight sting. He could not help but lament internally, "This is where I die." Before he could finish his thought, Xuantian felt a tremendous force yank him backwards. Xuanli's blade brushed by Xuantian's throat and slit a bit of his skin as blood seeped out of it. It was an extremely close shave. If Xuantian was slightly slower, his throat would have been cut by that slash. Surviving that brush from death had Xuantian breaking out in cold sweat and panting heavily. He looked towards Zimo at his side and was about to express his thanks when his vision blurred as a figure darted by. Zimo was already gone. Boom! After reaching out to pull Xuantian back from the edge of death, Zimo entered the stance of Plow Heaven stride immediately without saying a word. In an instant, the stone slab beneath his feet exploded and the ground shook. The buildings on both sides of the streets trembled, causing countless cultivators to exclaim. Zimo's gaze was sharp as a knife as he reached out with outstretched fingers and grabbed at Xuanli's head as though he was engulfing it. Before Xuanli could react after missing that attack, a person with a chilling aura appeared behind Xuantian and struck with a killing move right away. Zimo's massive palm descended and the atmosphere turned so repressive that Xuanli felt suffocated. Without any time to think, Xuanli slashed back in reverse at Zimo's wrist before the latter could finish his move. The blade trembled and 3 flashes of light shone. It was a superior-grade spirit saber. However, Zimo's physique was extremely strong right now, and it was too difficult for ordinary superior-grade spirit weapons to be able to hurt him. In the face of Xuanli's saber, Zimo's stance remained the same as he reached down and grabbed the blade with his bare hands. With a coil and a tremble, he seized the saber to his side. Leaning in, Zimo gripped the saber in his hand tightly and stabbed in reverse. Blood flashed and a bloodied saber protruded out from the back of Xuanli's head. The moment their figures exchanged positions, Xuanli's head was pierced and he died on the spot. Right from the beginning, Zimo could tell that this man was a nefarious figure. That was the reason why he struck with a killing move immediately without any mercy. After killing Xuanli, Zimo took a sidestep and leaned into the arms of another cultivator. That person had just placed his hand on his storage bag when he felt his vision blur and a throbbing pain in his chest. His body flew uncontrollably as he lost consciousness. Swash! Zimo's movements were different as his body swayed, leaving a series of afterimages. Lifting his left arm and using his fist as a seal, it descended onto another person's head. Brain juice was splattered. Yet another person's corpse fell.
Audacious!
You must have a death wish. The 10-odd cultivators that Xuanli brought over snapped to their senses and yelled, whipping out a myriad of weapons. Most of them were heavy melee combat weapons. One of them raised a gigantic hammer and smashed down on Zimo's head as the wind howled. Neither dodging nor retreating, Zimo gave a punch and went against the person's spirit weapon with his bare hands. The hammer was sent flying into the arms of another cultivator, causing the latter's ribs to be broken. The broken bones stabbed into his lungs like spearheads, causing the person to pant heavily and wheeze hoarsely. It was clear that he was not going to survive. Shadows intertwined on the long street as Zimo weaved through the cultivators in a flash and clashing sounds could be heard. In less than 10 breaths, everything went silent, leaving nothing but corpses on the ground. Chapter 362. 4 Mounted Bandits. Chapter 362. 4 Mounted Bandits. Everything had happened too quickly. Not to mention Xuanli's group who were involved in the fight. Even the bystanders were stunned as they stood with lost expressions. After a long time, shock passed through their eyes. As they looked at the green-robed cultivator standing in the bloodbath, 3 words shot through their minds: decisive to kill. Xuanli never had a chance to strike again after missing his first attack. This man's personality is indeed rather suited for roaming in the ancient battlefield. What a pity, a cultivator in the crowd shook his head. With Xuanli dead and the 4 mounted bandits' vengeful personality, this group of people are bound to be tormented to death unless they look for some major sect in Xuantian City to back them up. Although sects of the top factions do not fear the 4 mounted bandits, there's no need for them to get on bad terms with the 4 mounted bandits just for these people. There's no sect that will want to take them in. On the long street, Zimo's expression was calm as he turned around and said softly, "Let's leave this place first." Xuantian and the rest nodded. By now they had realized as well. In the ancient battlefield, in Xuantian City, there was no room for logic or rules. This was a world where the fittest survive. A cruel place filled with bloodshed. The streets were filled with bloodstains that were still wet, as though telling everyone that a massacre had just happened. Battles could happen at any moment and other cultivators would just watch the show with no intention of helping. Showing weakness at a place as such would only cause their enemies to take advantage of them. The crowd on the street gave way as the cultivators looked at Zimo's group as though they were looking at dead people. Right now, the most important thing for Xuantian and the rest was to find a place to settle down for the night so that they could recover their energy and heal their injuries. The well-preserved buildings in Xuantian City were long taken over by many factions and cultivators, leaving only a few precarious buildings that were on the verge of collapsing. After walking for a while, Zimo's group found a dilapidated mansion on the street corner. It was not exactly accurate to call it a mansion. After all, the walls around the mansion had already collapsed, leaving behind only some broken walls. The courtyard was overgrown with weeds and the few houses remaining were in shambles. "Let's rest here for the night." Zimo knew very well that they would not be able to find a good place even if they were to continue searching. Furthermore, Xuantian, Lang Ro and the others were thoroughly exhausted and it was unsuitable for them to carry on outside. "Bro, take a rest first. I'll head out for a stroll and find out more about the background of Xuantian City," Little Fatty closed in and whispered. "All right, take care," Zimo nodded. Little Fatty had cultivated body tempering techniques before and was much stronger than Xuantian, Lang Ro and the others in terms of physique. Furthermore, he looked chubby and friendly. Tactful in his ways and alert, Zimo was not worried about Little Fatty's safety. Everyone's hearts felt heavy in this completely unfamiliar environment. Even though Xuantian City could ward off the birds, beasts and ancient living beings outside, it could not protect them from the greed in the hearts of cultivators, and that was even scarier than the demon beasts outside. Not wanting to burden Zimo, Xuantian and the others wanted to make good use of the time to recover energy and heal their injuries. Soon, Little Fatty returned. "Bro, I've asked around." Little Fatty pursed his lips and said in a deep voice, "There are a few top factions coexisting in Xuantian City. There's Glass Palace of the Immortal Sects, Malevolent Earth Sect of the Fiend Sects, Puppet Sect of the 5 Heretical Doctrines and Elixir Yang Sect and Thousand Crane Sect of the 4 Unorthodox Groups." Xuantian and the others frowned deeply with stern expressions. Immortal Sects, Fiend Sects, Unorthodox Groups and Heretical Doctrines. Those were the top factions of Tianhuang mainland. If they hadn't ventured deep into the ancient battlefield, they may never encounter these top factions throughout their lives. Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't had any interactions with Glass Palace, Puppet Sect, Elixir Yang Sect nor Thousand Crane Sect. However, he dealt with the 7 Fiend Sects a couple of years ago. Deep underground, Zimo encountered a couple of Fiend heirs and even killed the heir of Malevolent Earth Sect forcefully despite going against 5 of them. To be fair, the Malevolent Earth Sect heir had died unjustly in that fight. If not for the existence of the Spirit Lock formation such that the Fiend heirs could not unleash their full strength, Zimo would have been the one dead. Now that a few years have passed, Malevolent Earth Sect must have chosen a new Fiend heir. Of course, Zimo was not worried of being recognized by those of Malevolent Earth Sect as well. In that battle back then, the powerful skeleton caused the entire place to collapse with its final gambit. Later on, Demonis G mentioned that apart from the 2 of them, the only ones that survived were the 5 other Fiend heirs. That meant that no one of Malevolent Earth Sect had seen him before. Little Fatty continued, "Among them, Elixir Yang Sect and Thousand Crane Sects are weaker in terms of strength. Elixir Yang Sect is the largest elixir refinement sect in Tianhuang mainland with solid roots that trace back to the ancient era. Thousand Crane Sect is the largest talisman sect and they're the ones that created the most common tool of communication in the cultivation world, spirit cranes." Xiaoning and Lang Ro's eyes lit up when they heard the origins of Elixir Yang Sect and Thousand Crane Sect. If they could join those 2 sects for cultivation and refinement of elixirs and talismans, they would definitely be able to go further on their cultivation paths. Xuantian nodded. Since they're the unorthodox groups and specialize in elixir refinement as well as talisman making, it's only natural that they would be comparatively weaker in strength. However, elixir refinement masters and talisman masters are bound to be accompanied by strong people. Gulping, Little Fatty said slowly with a stern expression, "Apart from them, there's another faction in Xuantian City that even those factions would not want to provoke. The 4 mounted bandits." Xuantian and everyone else's hearts sank when they heard that. "Are they related to the cultivators at the North Gates?" Xuantian asked with a frown. Little Fatty nodded. The leader of the group of people killed by Bro was called Cho Wanli. He's a competent underling of the 4 mounted bandits. What's the background of the 4 mounted bandits such that even the immortal and fiend sects are not willing to provoke them? Shurjian asked. Little Fatty replied, "The strength of the 4 mounted bandits is definitely weaker than super sects such as Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect. However, it's said that they are extremely violent and their underlings are all desperados. Although Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect can definitely come out victorious in a battle, they would have to suffer huge losses for sure. That's the reason why the 4 mounted bandits and the few top factions are currently in harmony." When they heard that, Xuantian and the others were flustered and looked terrible. This meant that there was a high chance that they could be killed at any moment inside Xuantian City for offending such a faction. It was even more dangerous inside the city than outside. Little Fatty remarked, "Bro is not entirely to blame for this matter as well. The 4 mounted bandits are in the business of killing and robbing others to begin with. For cultivators that pass through the north gates, if they are weak or have no background, it'll be difficult for them to survive. This is a group of vicious and villainous people who take joy in killing others. Even if you hand over all the treasures in your storage bag, it's not guaranteed that you will walk out alive. At that point, Little Fatty sighed. I heard that there has already been 1,000 cultivators who have died in the hands of the 4 mounted bandits over the past month. A cold glint flickered through Zimo's narrow gaze. Chapter 363, Standoff. Chapter 363, Standoff. Xuantian furrowed her brows slightly. Since the 4 mounted bandits are so villainous, why aren't there anyone from the immortal sects coming forth to uphold justice? In her mind, those of the immortal sects are obligated to slay evil and uphold justice. How could they stand by the sidelines? Xuantian shook his head. There's no such thing as righteous warriors in the cultivation world, and it's the same for those in the immortal sections. Immortals and fiends merely differ in terms of the Tao they seek. That's right. None of those warriors get to live a long life, Little Fatty nodded. Lang Ro added, the Buddhists live with compassion and speak of purifying the masses. However, look at the number of monks passing through Xuantian city, and yet, none of them are coming forth to try and purify the villainous 4 mounted bandits. Suddenly, Zimo spoke. What's the cultivation of the 4 mounted bandits? Little Fatty replied, their leader, Chai Li, is at 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment, while the other 3, Lang Tan, Hu Meng and Bao Yunfeng, are at 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment. It's said that they grew up drinking the milk of ancient remnant beasts and lived in the jungles for many years, dominating the place while building up their bodies. Every single one of them is immensely strong and is comparable to demon beasts. When he heard that, Zimo's heart skipped a beat. 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment. They were finally coming across a 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator in the depths of the ancient battlefield. Zimo's current strength could suppress all 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivators, be it through immortality cultivation techniques or melee combat. However, he had no confidence against 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivators without using his power of blood chi. After all, his cultivation realm was only at 4 Meridian Foundation Establishment, and he had yet to achieve lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section for the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, with his mouth and eye orifices yet to be cleared. The 8 meridians are progressively tougher to unlock. Comparatively, the gap between the later meridians was wider as well. On the surface, a 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator was merely a single meridian above a 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator. However, the difference in strength was exponential. Even if dozens of 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivators joined forces, they might not be a match for a 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator. In the end, if one unlocked all 8 meridians, the difference would be even more significant. If the 4 mounted bandits had a 7 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator among them with a demon beast-like physique and specialized in melee combat, even Zimo would have a tough time dealing with him. There was a long period of silence in the mansion. A while later, Little Fatty continued, however, I heard that Bao Yunfeng, the number 4 of the 4 mounted bandits, is the only one in Xuantian city right now. The other 3 have gone out and might only return a couple of days later. Zimo's group was in a passive position in the current situation. Now that night had descended, they would be faced with countless ferocious beasts and ancient living beings if they escaped from Xuantian city. Apart from Zimo, the rest were most likely doomed. However, if they were to continue staying in the city, the 4 mounted bandits would definitely not let them survive the night, given the latter's vengeful nature. Ta, ta, ta. Suddenly, the ground began to shake uncharacteristically as the sound of galloping rumbled like thunder from far away. It was headed in their direction at an extremely fast speed. Get away! They're from the 4 mounted bandits. Ah! The crowd was in a mess as shrieks could be heard. Some of the cultivators who could not dodge in time were trampled into meat sludge without a corpse left. Their leader seems to be Bao Yunfeng. It's him. Given the ancient remnant beast, cloud-seeking leopard, that he's riding on, there's no mistake about it. Not far away, a dust cloud billowed with the piercing stench of blood. A muscular man, tall with black hair that draped over his shoulders, led the pack with a fierce and violent gaze. Beneath the man was a massive and ferocious leopard. It had sharp claws and its body was covered in luxuriant fur that had a cloud-like pattern. Shimmering in the darkness, its eyes shone with a cold gleam. An ancient remnant beast, the cloud-seeking leopard. What happened? Why are they so angry? Haven't you heard? Dozens of cultivators under the 4 mounted bandits were killed by an outsider at the north gate. Ha! Who could be so bold? Those few sitting over there. I heard that the green-robed cultivator was the one who killed them. There were some cultivators pointing at the mansion. A commotion of this size instantly attracted the attention of many cultivators. Even though it was at night, the number of cultivators gathered gradually increased. In a 2-story building not far away, a handsome young man in a white shirt sat by the window. Behind him was an elderly man, standing with his hands down. The handsome young man held a folding fan and his features were like a painting. With smooth and delicate skin, he had an indescribable bearing of elegance. At that moment, seeing that it was already late, the white-robed man had just stood up and was about to leave when he caught sight of what was happening. Out of curiosity, he could not help but ask Uncle Yang, "What's happening over there?" The elderly man behind the white-robed man replied, "I heard that the green-robed cultivator killed Xuanli." "Oh!" The white-robed man scoffed coldly. "Xuanli? Good kill. Someone so villainous should have died a long time ago." Even though his tone was cold, the white-robed man's voice was exceptionally soothing. "Young master, let's go. There's nothing to see here. The few of them are bound to be dead now that Bao Yunfeng has brought so many people with him." The elderly man bowed. "It's all right." Waving it off, the white-robed man said, "Let's take a look first." With that, he opened his folding fan and sat down once more. Turning slightly, he revealed his slender and fair neck as his bright gaze was fixed on a delicate face in that broken mansion. Hundreds of cultivators ran over in the dark with menacing expressions and ferocious auras. The cold gleam of spirit weapons shone disturbingly against the moonlight. At this moment, Xuantian and the rest had barely rested for the time it takes an incense stick to burn. Their bodies were still aching, but their enemies were already knocking on the door. What should we do? Everyone looked towards Zimo subconsciously. Zimo was in a lotus position, still resting and recuperating. Night Spirit was sprawled on the ground. Without even lifting its head, its pitch-black eyes were hidden in the night as it took a swift glance at the ancient remnant beast, the cloud-seeking leopard. The moment Bao Yunfeng stepped into the courtyard, Zimo suddenly opened his eyes and shot up from the ground. Bao Yunfeng had led more than 100 desperados for the attack. Their aura was so terrifying that the surrounding cultivators felt chills running down their spines. However, another monstrous aura exploded the moment Zimo opened his eyes and stood up. It was as though a tempest had been set off, howling and gushing furiously. Alone, Zimo stood motionlessly on the spot and his body looked frail. However, his aura was no weaker than Bao Yunfeng's group. The aura of Bao Yunfeng's group resembled a bloodstorm. However, what stood behind Zimo resembled mountains of corpses and oceans of blood. Not far away on the second floor, the elderly man called Uncle Yang exclaimed slightly when he saw that. The white-robed man's eyes lit up with interest as well. "Oh. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.